And I alternate it. Right. But some. Yeah, like maybe one.
You just don't get to work. Just I don't think my laptop on it in 3 hours. I go for this in here? No. I would start with this. I got. How are you? How are you? Good. Yeah. You might. And it's just right there. I don't know, it's great. I don't know how you want to do this. I have what's the connectability? So you want her?
Yeah, okay.
You have all those. Well, if we can get you on the Zoom, then we can make sure you're. Oh, yeah.
Where's on the Wi-Fi?
Yeah. And the Zoom callers know they don't get this. Yeah. See what you. Yeah. That's nice. Thank you.
So it's center.
No, I got a link quiet.
Incognito.
Yeah. Well, it likes to be where I have to, I can get out.
On the airplane? What's the?
Oh, 45 avenues. I
Five.
can't. About the rock.
You're right.
She had the 7 shoots. And I'm getting out of there. I had 3 people go here a little bit. Nothing. What do you? Nothing. My back and forth. She was in the neighborhood and I pulled my bowl with. Oh, no. Oh, no, it was, he lives in the neighborhood. It was legit stuff like. Don't have it yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, yes. Yeah, that would be cool. Hi and welcome. Let's see, I don't know where. I'm just looking here, but I can see. Yes, so they can see you there, or they can see you like your you see like your address, so your computer. Stand over here. I won't stay here. But if you come here, they can see you here too. So. Okay, great. Hi, I'm Jody Showman. And we're going to get started with a few administrative items, which is the sign-in sheet. So we're going to give everyone in the room CE credit. And then we're going to hand out the certificates. If you can fill in your name and license number, then I'll take them back and sign them at the end of the class and give them right back to you. Does that work? Mm-hmm. Great. All right. So I'm going to do a quick intro. We're still getting working on connecting me. So I'm Jody Showman with CMG Home Loans. I am partners with Mitch Friedman and Dale Sproul, who's sitting in the back of the room. And today we're going to talk about divorce real estate and why it matters. And I'm going to give you a little bit of background on me and why I'm the one standing in front of the room today teaching this class. So I have been in the mortgage business 44 years, so it's been a long time on career. And throughout my time in the mortgage business, I've had many opportunities to work with clients that were divorcing or divorced and then wanted to come back and qualify for a home or get a mortgage. And throughout those years, I found many times they couldn't. They have a divorce agreement that says they're going to do something within a period of time and they can't. Because the way the divorce decree is written doesn't either fit with underwriting regulatory guidelines, or we don't have income to qualify, or other things occurred during the divorce that no one's aware of that now precludes that person from performing on their marital settlement agreement. So several years ago, I decided to specialize in this particular area in divorce mortgage guidance. Since then, besides having 44 years as what I would be considered a long-standing career in the industry, I've specifically trained for divorce mortgage planning and divorce mortgage guidance.
Yeah, I'll do.
Oh wait, is that it?
I'll do that.
Okay, great. This is gonna help me do all the admin stuff. So in that training, we have created this course. And what you'll see in this course is a lot of stuff that pertains to real estate in general and dealing with clients. We're gonna talk specifically about dealing with clients in divorce and why it matters from a real estate perspective. Obviously, I do it from a mortgage perspective, but I will bring it to you from the real estate perspective as well. So next you get to share the screen. So I'm just gonna share my screen. Okay, so who in the room has ever dealt with a real estate transaction involving divorce? All right, tell me what happened. Give me, what was different?
Well, the challenging part of this one, because it's not amicable,
There you go.
was I couldn't even send out the electronic things to them both at the same time. In fear that one would sign for the other one. So I had to be very cognizant of, I sent it to him, when he signed, then I sent it to her.
Okay.
So it was a lot more work. And the fighting between them was absolutely ridiculous.
And how many of you have dealt with clients that you can't talk to both of them at the same time? Or they're fighting, or you have to be careful what you send to one that you don't send to the other, or that you do, but you can't send them together. Is that a normal real estate transaction? Not really. Normally you have people that are doing the same thing, they're buying or selling a house together, they're communicating. So that is one situation that is very common in dealing with mortgage and real estate divorce. Who else? Anything different?
What's that?
Anything different about that transaction?
No, ours was very notable, so.
That's
not
awesome.
exciting at all.
When you get cyclical transactions, that helps. Okay, so I think I'm up and running. Let's just test this. Oh, let me turn it on. That always helps. I'm good at some things you'll see and others I'm not so good at. So technology is not my bestest. So yeah, it becomes different and we're gonna walk through why it's different and how as a real estate agent, you can train in areas of these differences to actually create a business niche for yourself that can supplement your other business, or you can choose to focus solely on it and become an expert at it. So we're gonna look at what we're gonna learn in this presentation. We're gonna build your background knowledge. We're gonna learn some divorce basics. We're gonna learn key questions about keeping or selling the house. This is a big one. We're gonna talk about appraisal, condition, insurance, and title. Who would ever think about checking the condition of a house before deciding whether someone's gonna keep it versus selling it? Yeah, who does a home inspection when someone does finance their house? I do enforce. Because it could change an equity position when making a decision about what the equity is. And I've got lots of case studies at the end of this will tell you lots of stories about stuff like this in situations I've actually been involved in. Credit and divorce, that's a biggie. Tax, alimony, child support, bankruptcy, and equitable distribution. We're gonna touch on this stuff. I'm not a CPA, I am not an attorney, so anything I say you can't write down or take it for fact, but I do know a little bit about it from being involved in it and share what I know. And then how to build a team around divorce, and then marketing considerations for trying, if you want to pursue this avenue, how do you market yourself? Okay, I'm gonna quickly, before we jump into the rest of this, give Dale and Mitch a quick opportunity to stand up and introduce themselves, because they're gonna participate in this presentation as well. Mitch?
Hi, I'm Eric Simpson, and I'm a character on The Simpsons. I'm Mitch Friedman, as I know all of you, but I've been your in-house lender for the last 15 years. I don't know if a lot of people know that, I've been here that long. Just wanted to share with you that Jody and I have been friends for 30 years.
No, too many to
Kind
remember.
of joined partnership about 20 years ago.
26?
Yeah, I'm about 4 days older than she is, and she continues to remind me every time her birthdays are coming around. And we thought this would be a really good presentation because there's a lot of divorce that goes on. And when Jody came back to me and said, I'm gonna start focusing on this, and took all the classes she needed to take to get more knowledge around the subject, it was eye-opening in my opinion of, I didn't think about getting an inspection done before you were have a divorce, was what if there's $100,000 in improvements? That thing changes the equity position for the person who's maybe keeping the home. So it was really very insightful, and so I'm not presenting today because I haven't presented this yet, but I will be after today. So it'll be my second time around, I just thought it was good to have her come and share this information with you guys. And I think you'll walk away with going, oh my God, I did not think about the majority of this information when that came up. And then her last bullet was, if you wanted to get more in depth with this, to become more of a certified agent to represent those scenarios and kind of market yourself that way, this would be big information you're gonna want to know about to make a decision to do that. And then thank you for your continued support as your lender in-house, and Gail has recently joined our office to be another president along with me, because there's 100+ of you and one of me. And with a wife and 3 daughters, that makes me like one less of me, so Gail's here to also say hello and go from there.
Yeah, I'm Dale. I've been doing money for 10 years now with Mitch and Jody. And I agree, I took this class myself and was kind of shocked at some of the things I learned, things to keep in your back pocket, and also show that you're the expert. It's a great way to kind of grow your business, whether you're that person's next referral, friends have friends who get divorced, and they get divorced, or whether you talk with mediators or attorneys and try to build your business in that way of being the expert. So it's a great way to have that expertise added to your list of services.
And Dale's also trained as a certified divorce lending professional, so she has special training in this area as well. All right, let's jump in. Thanks, guys. All right, what's the outcomes of this presentation? Well, I want to give you the knowledge of maybe a different skill set it takes to do divorces. We heard from the very first example that there might be a different skill set you're going to bring to the table. I want to give you some ideas of what your role is as a real estate agent in divorce. Obviously, there's real property to sell or buy, that's an obvious role, but there's other roles you take on during this process. Understanding the financial and credit concerns, although that's our area of the house, you guys need to know and be in tune with the team, because if that gets ruined, then you may not be able to facilitate your job. And then marketing considerations for this is a niche. So let's build our background. Why does divorce matter to us in the real estate industry? Well, let's look at some statistics. All right, so there's about 900,000 divorces in the United States each year. That's a lot. If you consider there's about 5.9 million in the state of Colorado, and you look at the statistics of 50% of marriages end in divorce, that's a lot of people that have potential to have to do a real estate transaction in order to complete their divorce. The average length of a marriage ends in about 8 years. About 50% of marriages end in divorce, and the first divorce happens around the age of 30. Who wants to take a guess at what's the largest age group of divorce? Somewhere in my age group. Don't make sure people know what you say. 40 to 45, right? 50 to 64. Divorce on the rise because of COVID, right? That's where we talk about that a little bit. And then climbing divorce 50+. They call them the silver splitters, which you see later in the I'm not silver yet, but yeah, silver splitter. 50 to 64 is the largest percentage, and you can think of them in a minute. We're going to talk about why. Home ownership rates between the ages 50 and 64 is one of the lowest home ownership rates, right? 75%, and then above 65, it goes up to like 63 or 79%. So between 30 and 50 is 63%, and between what they can refer to as the silver splitters is about 75 to 79%. So this age group that is getting divorced, it is the large rising population of divorce, is also the largest population of people that own real estate, and sometimes multiple pieces of real estate, right? A divorce can end up in 3 transactions if you think about just owning a house and buying 2. But if they own second homes or investment properties, it can actually end up being multiple transactions. So just some more statistics, 23% of all people that are married have been married before. 40% of new marriages include one spouse that had previously been married. 20% of marriages, both spouses have been married before, and 80% of divorcees will remarry within 4 years. And now you're gonna see that statistics of how many remarriages don't quite make it through. 62nd of second mortgage, then divorce. And then it goes up from there, so third and fourth, increased percentages. Wonder if we just don't change, we just divorce and marry again, maybe we need to look at changing some characteristics, I'm not sure. However, it gives a whole new meaning to stay in touch with your database. There's the silver splitters, this is mind you, my sync and my slide is not the greatest, so excuse me for that, like I said, I do some things well and some things not so well. So that's the ages over 50 is silver splitters. And then remarriages, 50% of all marriages that end divorce, 41% of first marriages, 60% of second, 73% of third, and then 80% will remarry. So you can start adding up and just kind of doing a general calculation of math in your head. I think the why is really important. Obviously, the why from a business perspective is important, but when I got into this, it was not really a business perspective reason. It was a people need help. People, I have had calls from a lot of times a wife, but not also that I've had calls from husbands that are so scared and so not knowing the right move. I never forget the call I had from a woman married 50 some years, called me up, couldn't even breathe, and said, I'm getting divorced, I've never run any financials, I don't even know how to open a checking account. That person needs our help. As well as, I'll never be able to afford a home for me and my 15-year-old son that I just want to make sure I can stay home with until he gets through high school, which by the way, we did get her into a home with her 15-year-old son, a beautiful home. And many times when you're dealing with your divorce, you're dealing with children and families. And that is this statistics is something that is really near and dear to my heart. Home ownership versus renting provides a better family environment, a better stable environment for the outcomes of children. And then some of these statistics just say that owning versus renting gives a better cognitive result, 9% in math and 7% in reading. It also helps with social and behavioral situations, and there is no gender difference. So children in homes that they own have an easier time in school, have a better cognitive outcome, and have lower behavioral issues. Why do you think that is?
More stability.
More stability. And who do they live around? The same friends, they go to the same school, they have family members that are close by. All those things contribute to this. I think that statistics is a big why, especially when there's family. All right, how does it affect close home? Name for me some effects of why people get divorced. Money is one of the top. Financial is one of the biggest ones. I actually have a funny slide in here. It talks about whether or not you can predict the chance of divorce by credit score. I don't think it's actually factual, but I think it's kind of hilarious. What else?
Cheating.
Okay, infidelity. What else?
Kids moving out.
Kids moving out, and give me a broader definition of what kids moving out is. What is that in life? Empty nester, retirement, a big life change, right? Kids moving out. So we're gonna go through all of these. So one close to home is the Marshall Fire. Do you think a home burning down and having to rebuild a home and maybe finding out you're underinsured, and maybe your spouse was the one who's responsible for insurance and kids are displaced and all that? Do you think that added any stress? Yeah, so do you think if you have a marriage that was already maybe stressed out, that maybe that could be the breaking point? Why did COVID create so much divorce? Exactly right, because we're all crammed in the same house, and not only we were crammed in the same house 24/7, we didn't have a lot of outside social interactions because we gave up our friends, or we couldn't go see them as often, we couldn't go to the gym, we couldn't even get out of the house. And on top of that, we are working at home, so now we are working at home and living at home, and our children were at home, so we are now teaching them and became the teacher. So all that added together is why COVID kind of created an increase in divorce. Kids at home, work from home, cold hard winters. It's another one, right? It's dark, you're inside, you're kind of stuck together, you can't go out and do your things. Inflation and finances can create hardship. You know, especially if you have a difference in opinion of how to spend or earn money, right? So it doesn't have to be that one is just irresponsible, but you could just have a difference of opinion how to do that. And then the cost of things go up. And now all of a sudden that differential gets really large. Adult kids leave the home, empty nesters, tax time, why is tax time? And it's a lot of times where the other, one spouse learns something about the financial, they may not have been told earlier. And here, I do that a lot. When we filed our taxes, I never knew this. When I found this out, I realized my marriage was over. Okay, so that's another one. Higher rates in debt spending habits, elder parent here. Has anyone ever taken care of an elderly parent? I am right now. How stressful is that? Yeah, really stressful. And if your spouse doesn't, if the spouse doesn't have the same situation, never gone through the same situation, there may be a little less sensitivity to exactly how stressful it is. I can tell you, put my mom in 5 different homes between 2 different states, and it took many trips, so it was a lot of time away from home. It's very, very stressful. So elder parent care can weigh on a marriage, retirement, because 2 things. 1, we're all of a sudden all at home, and 2, there might be a difference in desire of what are we doing in retirement. One person might have traveled for their whole career and like, yippee, I get to sit on the couch. And the other person was like, I've been in Colorado my whole life, I want to travel. Well, that's a little difference of opinion. High need dependence, so children with high needs getting strained in marriage, especially later in life, and then career employment change. What do you think happened to a marriage during COVID when one of the spouses owned a restaurant? And that restaurant wasn't allowed to open. And they lost one entire source of income, plus maybe debt that was liability in that restaurant. That can be enough of a financial strain to cause divorce. All right, so those are pretty obvious, but wanted to bring some near home. All right, so what are the real estates in divorce? And these are really, if you start thinking about the statistics I went over early in these transactions, you'll see how some of this adds up. So you need to buy, when someone owns a piece of real estate and there's a divorce, you normally need to sell the real estate. And potentially each person still wants to own a house, so you're gonna buy 2. So that's typically 3 transactions out of a typical divorce. If they own second homes or investment properties, there are additional real estate to need to be handled. And if they're one's gonna refinance out of the equity of the home, which does happen a lot now, then the other person's still gonna purchase a home. So there's still typically a home purchase happening. They buy, and later on, they may buy a new house jointly with a partner. So a lot of times what will happen, remember that remarriage certificate in 4 years, so they move out, they buy their own house, somewhere along the line, they have found a new partner, now those 2 people wanna buy their own house, that partner probably owns a house, they own a house, so now they're gonna buy a house jointly with their new partner. Each side may do that, they may sell the marital house a year or 2 post-divorce. I can tell you from dealing with a lot of people in divorce, that they want to keep the house, absolutely, I'm keeping the house, and never, ever, not giving up my house, and about, as soon as they win all that, about a year later, they sell the house. It was more out of an emotional reaction than it was that they actually wanted to keep that house. So, a lot of people will sell in a year or 2 after divorce, and then sell the home of a new partner. And then per statistics, maybe do all that again in about 3 to 4 years. So again, another concept of staying in touch with your clientele. All right, why become an expert? Number 1, in my position, in what I do, people call me. The other day I got a referral and says, hey, I'm working with Conscious Family and I need to get equity in my house, I need to do my refi. Never talked to the person before. Actually, I didn't talk to Conscious Family, Dale did. But they had my name with Dale's as the expert. Please call these people to handle this. He's abroad, we're working on his refi, and when he comes home next week, we're gonna have our first meeting and get this done for him. So business comes to you because they know you're the go-to person. And you're become highly trained in mitigating and resolving conflict during the situation, which is one extra skill you're gonna need. You're the go-to expert and you market-proof your business. Do you think that a lot of people think about the interest rate when they're getting divorced? No, I did divorce, but rates are 6. I'm gonna wait till I go down to 4. No, so they have to buy and sell no matter what the market is. So it does insulate you from any kind of market movement. including with refinances, although we will talk about this, assumptions are becoming a large demand, which we do assist in, but they are difficult to get, so we'll talk about that on a whole, I did a whole slide on that just because it's so prevalent. So what's different in divorce real estate? So first of all, you may be being directed by a court order versus the people you're working with. So you may not be directed by the seller, you may be directed by the MSA, which is marital settlement agreement, or MOU, which is memorandum of understanding, two same documents at different avenues getting there, or a court order or by the judge. Okay, so when you become an expert in real estate, you may be appointed by the judge as the real estate agent that's gonna sell this house. So the parties may not have a choice. See any contention there? Yeah, can be kind of conflict oriented. If you get a past client referral in divorce, always make sure you check what process stage that they are in divorce. Because it'll change how you will go about your position as real estate agent. Many times a real estate agent, and we'll talk about advocate and neutral in a minute. Many times a real estate agent, you are kind of by definition the neutral. Because there's one asset split between two people and you're in the middle. So you can't normally do your job well as an advocate. And I'll talk about that in a minute. On our side of the house, a lot of times we are also the neutral, but we also step up in many cases as an advocate. I'll tell you what the difference is. Make sure you know where you're at before you start throwing out advice. Because you might be giving advice as an advocate and all of a sudden you've just messed up your position as a neutral and therefore may be deemed not the right real estate agent to help with the transaction. So always start out as a neutral and you know where you're at. It can require serious conflict resolution, as you said. If you were fighting, you have to be careful who you communicate with, how you communicate with them, and they might not agree that they want to sell the property. There's not very many transactions, maybe after 2008 when people are in trouble, and if you were in that market, then you did experience this, when people are selling their house, but they don't really want to. Not all that frequent. Required to sell because the court said so, or because financially they have to. And there might be also some undue influence from one party to another. This happens a lot more on the financial side of the house, but you will see it in things like, I don't know where it comes up, distress listings, the condition of the property's bad, there's been missed payments and credit stuff going on, unemployment, forbearance, and hidden liens. That's a big one that we identify a lot that causes massive problems in marital settlement agreements if they're not identified proactively. Intentional obstacles. The person in the house spouse doesn't want to sell the house. So, you know, they don't clean up the house, they leave the bed unmade, maybe the dog made a mess in the living room, and they think, it'll still show well that way. Because they don't want to sell the house, so let's just hinder the process. And in this market, that could really hinder the process, because we're not in a market where things are flying off. So not preparing the house for showings, finances may be strained enough or they can't fix things that need to be fixed, or give it that good curb appeal, or pay for staging. So you may have an actual financial situation where it's not going to show well, and you still have to do your job in getting it. So tight timeframes. What a divorce attorney do you think stops and go, wonder what the real estate market is when people disagree there? Very seldom. So they might say that house has to be sold in 120 days. Is there any houses right now not selling in 120 days? Yeah, the market's slower, so higher end homes are taking longer to sell, and we're seeing them sit on the market 120 days. So that can be a problem if you're under a court order for a timeline, and then they're like, but I want to maximize my equity, so I'm not going to sell it below this number. And I don't care what he or she says, I'm not selling below this number. So you can get into that a lot. And then you may have to testify in court. So if you deal with the divorcing situation, I've been an expert witness in the contempt of court cases. I've done expert witness reports for some court cases. And if you are requested to testify in court, all you're going to do is be a neutral real estate agent and tell the reason why whatever happened failed or whatever the situation was. Some of the unintentional obstacles may be what you're testifying about.
Hey Jerry, so
Yeah.
your point about the delay in selling a home, we have a neighbor, like a 5.495 house. It's been on the market for almost 6 months. It was a divorce for sure, you know, woman who was living there. And she finally said, just buy me out at this price, do what you want, and it's still sitting on the market, literally almost 6 months now.
Yeah.
Still hasn't budged on the price, still waiting, guy lives in between islands, house is vacant. It's not a good thing.
Yeah, and a lot of times, they'll just buy me out of the equity. Well, what the heck is that number? Is it the 5.4 we have it on the market for? And it's not selling? Or is it less? Or are you gonna, how much less you gonna take? How much less is it? Are we gonna do an appraisal? Are we gonna believe the appraiser? There's a lot. And I just have that situation where it's not selling and we have to cash out the equity. We've done that. I'm gonna give you that as my last case study because it's one of my most recent cases. But in that situation, there's still a lot to go on as a real estate agent that would need to be you being involved with because there needs to be a value. And if the court order or the marital settlement agreement says it must sell, and there isn't the opportunity for that equity buyout, then we have to have another agreement, because you may be hired under that marital settlement agreement to sell the house. And that means your job is to sell the house. Any questions yet? Comments? All right, and Dale and Mitch, just jump in wherever I bring.
Comment is don't get a divorce.
Yeah, I know.
How about don't get married?
Go
How about don't get married?
Start there.
Divorce, don't get married.
So who's ever worked with attorneys? So besides a real estate attorney, do they know real estate?
No.
Not much.
They try.
They know a lot of stuff, but they don't know real estate. So they don't know the current real estate market conditions. They don't necessarily know value, and they don't know the timing to sell. That's why they need you. They don't understand how to track down missed liens. They ask, there's a discovery process. Hey, do you have any other things you owe? But they don't maybe pull a title policy or pull an O&E, which we do, to make sure there's missed liens. And I can't tell you the number of times there are missed liens, either out of lack of disclosure or actually out of lack of knowledge. An IRS lien, has anyone had a client at IRS lien they didn't know about? Well, if you're coming out of divorce and that divorce maybe had financial stress going into it, could there be a lien on that property that maybe someone doesn't know about or didn't want to tell their spouse because they didn't want to add any stress? So missed liens is a biggie. Clouded title or title inaccuracy. This happens not very often, but on a rare occasion it does. There's judgment liens that show up there. There's I had one recently where there was a parent on the title from long ago, but the parent was deceased. But they'd never removed the name from title. So going into a transaction, I now have clouded title because I can't close the transaction until I clean it up. It's relatively easy to clean that one up, but you had to clean it up, right? So some are easy, some are not so easy. And then conditions affecting the value of the appraisal. I'm going to give you a prime example of that one, the one I was involved in about 3 years ago. And then insurance eligibility. Who thinks of that? We're going to talk about slide with insurance. What's going on with insurance right now? It's awful. That's a good response.
Yeah.
What else?
Can't get it.
They're not.
Get it. What else? If you can get it, it's
Expensive.
expensive. Costs are going up significantly on insurance. We'll talk about that in more detail. Do family law attorneys know mortgage guidelines? No, they don't. And do they make a lot of agreements guiding their client to get into a court-ordered agreement based on knowledge that is absolutely inaccurate? They do, every day. I see it every day. Do they mean to? No, they just don't have the right information because they didn't hire someone like us ahead of time to do mortgage planning for their client. So inaccurate market value, something else we would help with an appraisal if we did an appraisal. Qualifying income, duration, and continuances, things attorneys don't think about. Credit status and the effect of credit during the divorce is another issue. Undisclosed liens is a biggie, and time of execution of agreement. So depending on when they execute agreement could affect if we can even use the income that they're agreeing to have shared after the settlement. And then regulatory mortgage guidelines, which we know and they don't. It's not like they're not smart in family law, they are, but they're not smart or they're not educated in the areas in which they are making decisions and guiding their clients. That's why they need us. That's where you can be an expert today. You can be an expert today. A law attorney can call you and say, what's the estimated time to market for a house above this price? And you could give them that information and have them more educated than they are today. How about that? All right. So flawed MSAs, flawed marital settlement agreements, or incomplete and inaccurate data. What does it do? So unknown means inaccurate market value, unknown market conditions, unidentified house condition, unappealable divorce agreement clauses, and create unexpected outcomes. And these are all things we work with. So MSA requires refinance and the house spouse cannot qualify. Because I see this all the time. You have to refinance in 120 days. Well, did anyone mention you don't qualify? So what does that fail? So it doesn't allow the out spouse to qualify because of the house spouse. By the way, the house spouse is the person in the house, right? Out spouse person out of the house. I figured that was a given, but I should probably explain that. So the out spouse can't qualify either because we can't get equity out of the house spouse in order to give it to the out spouse to qualify. So the MSA did not evaluate qualifying for home ownership for either spouses. Part of our job and part of your job is to make sure we ensure home ownership eligibility after divorce. And so what's the equity? What are the proceeds? What's the house price they could buy? And then what's your mortgage lending team say they can qualify for? So inability for the out spouse to qualify for a new home purchase causes house spouse cannot qualify to keep the house that they signed up. They're going to keep the house and to buy out the equity because they can't buy out the spouse. Accurate data was not obtained before the final property settlement. By the way, you're going to see this later in the presentation. Property settlements are final. You can't go back and go, I didn't know the house was only worth that much. I thought it was worth this much. I was looking at the market last year. Judge, please just ignore that. We want to redo this. That doesn't happen. You can re-engage in a whole other agreement and you can re-engage your attorney to attempt, but especially in an MOU where it's a memorandum of understanding and it's been mediated, so you make an agreement through mediation. The divorce, you made a decision based on data that you agreed to at that time, and no judge will go back and go, I'm sorry you didn't have that, you didn't take the time to get the accurate data. Let's just relook at that. It doesn't happen. And I'll show you some case studies where the divorce settlement was inequitable because of data that was not obtained early in the process. Damage credit. This is a big one that can happen. When you get married, when you're married for 8 years, I think that was the statistic. Was there any joint credit? So when you get divorced, what happens to that joint credit?
Stop being
Yeah, you're still on it, and maybe it stops getting paid. What can that do to your credit score? We'll tell you that in a chart here in a bit. It causes instability in family life because I can't tell you the stress. Talk about stress and divorce, and then the stress when someone calls me and says, I talked to my lender that I used when I bought my house, and they said I can't qualify because my divorce decree says this. And I say, well, first let me look at the divorce decree, let me see what I can do. And many times we can find a way, but that phone call comes in a lot. The stress in the voice that comes across the phone is very high. And a lot of times there's family that's affected, or children. And then our favorite saying is it's cheaper to do it right than do it over, because many times you have to re-engage the divorce team, which is lawyers, maybe go back to court, maybe end up in contempt of court. All that costs a lot of money. And if you're starting divorce out of financial stress anyways, it just gets kind of ugly. So it's best for attorneys to engage us as experts up front because it can avoid a lot of that. All right, here's one of my messed up slides. So what are the options? And I'm just gonna bring this up. So when somebody's looking at divorce, we're looking at keeping the house, selling the house, refinancing the house, or sharing the home. Does anyone know the term of sharing the home? They've given it the term cohabitating is the obvious one. There is a different term called nesting. So that means they keep the family home, the kids stay there, and the parents go back and forth. It normally lasts about a year or two, and then it doesn't last anymore. I've never seen them last for very long. Normally it's the kids are close to, graduating or something, they do it for a year or two until they sell out. Colorado is an equitable distribution state. That's something important to know, which means divorce settlements are equitable, but not necessarily equal. Okay, so then I also will get a call and go, well, I want half. I want half, my son's running the other half. I'm like, well, you might not be entitled to half, but that's where you need to have your mediator or family law attorney guide you, but the judges will typically make sure it's equitable. And some of that may be how long you're married, was the house owned before the marriage, all those things they look at. It's common law state. So you may have people that call and say, well, no, I'm not married. I just lived with my partner for the last 13 years in this house and we own it jointly. Are they very ties to Colorado? Probably. So whether or not it's called divorce or not, they're probably going through some procedure called something that looks a lot like a divorce. Yeah.
I have a quick question in that sense. So what if the one partner bought the house prior to getting married? They've been married, but they've been cohabitating before they got legally married for multiple years. Do they still look at it as common law prior to the legal marriage?
That's gotta go to a family law attorney.
Good question.
That's outside.
Okay, fair.
I don't know what to do with the mortgage on that, I can answer the question, but
Gotcha.
that's definitely right down the pike of
Okay.
what are their rights, how are they gonna mediate it? Because legal rights that go to court, then the judge decides based on the law, but sometimes they'll agree independently amongst themselves, as long as they sign that agreement and it's not an unconscionable agreement, then that can go.
I was just curious because I have a friend going through that exact thing. And so she's like, well, everything that I've put in financially into this, am I just like SOL?
You know, I need a referral of somebody to talk to for advice. One company we work a lot with is Conscious Family.
Okay.
And they're not necessarily, they have attorneys, but a lot of times you're just dealing with a mediator and you're not dealing with a law attorney, so you're not dealing with quite the same rate. And
Gotcha.
a lot of firms will take a small, very small, fee for coaching. So they're not gonna be the divorce attorney, but they're gonna coach.
Gotcha.
Okay,
Thank
so
you.
I do know some companies that do it. So common law state, marriage still that, if you get a referral and they go, oh, no, we're not married. Homeownership eligibility, do they qualify with credit score debt obligations under the MSA? Market conditions to sell the house is gonna be something we're gonna evaluate, whether there's an option to sell it, so you might have one that says sell, but the market conditions are not gonna allow you to sell that house right now. Therefore, we have to change what our plan is, and I have a case study right now, it's actually closing Friday that I just helped figure that out after 4 months. And then how does alimony and child support affect their options? So if they decide they wanna do something, how's the child support and alimony affect that? What are the impact on taxes? We're gonna talk about that briefly. I'm not a tax accountant, so I can't give anything official, but we are gonna talk about the effect of taxes and some things I've seen. How the liens and the debt versus the market value. So I had one that the wife is gonna keep the house, keep the kids in the house. Everything was agreed on, have an MOU out of mediation. I was even involved in the mediation while it was happening in the room. And found out later that the value we were using was totally off. And not that we came up with it, they came up with it, did not want to pay for an appraisal. So she lost $70,000 after the agreement. So those things are very important. So what is different about participating as a real estate agent in a divorce? And these are just some of the ideas that I came up with as to things I see. So one, start out with, you're not a mediator. They should have a mediator or an attorney, but you'll feel like one sometimes, right? But just be careful not to step in the mediator role. Your goal as a real estate agent is to maximize equity. Is that always our goal? Right, so there's a house that has to sell, you're gonna split the proceeds, and your job is to maximize the equity, doing what you do as a real estate expert. You will provide problem solving and not one size fits all solution, which is this case study I'll talk about later, that it's totally out of the box solution. It wouldn't have fit with a lot of people, but it fit with them. We have to support a productive and healthy process. We view clients as individuals. So I do know, and a lot of times dealing with divorce where I'm dealing with both spouses, I might maybe see the perspective of one a little bit more than the other, or I don't know, maybe connect with one a little bit more than the other. And my job is to remain neutral. Therefore, I have to make sure I'm, giving the value of both spouses equally. That's really important. Do not allow the home to become a vessel for expression, frustration, and aggression. So in other words, they've got this big asset and you'll see where it's being held over the other person or used in a point of control. Our job is to keep it out of that level, keep a level head. You have to keep a level head because parties you work with may not have one. Sensitivity is required for sure. Educate and honest guidance. That's our job. Educate and give honest guidance, right? Our job's not to decide whether they should be divorcing or not, or who's right or who's wrong. Just here's the market, here's the value, here's the considerations, and here's the action items. How do we want to approach it? Patience, lots of patience, and fair and impartial representation. Those are all pretty obvious, but that is our job when we get involved in divorce real estate. All right, and here's the definitions of advocate and neutral. This is the financial one. That's the one I had, and it would extrapolate to you. Basically, a neutral is doing your job to maximize the equity of that asset so that the agreement can be carried out, okay? When you're an advocate, you are on one side or the other. Normally, when you go to court, if you go to court, you are an advocate for one side or the other. Or if you have your friend that is getting divorced and you're helping your friend, a lot of times in that situation, you are acting as an advocate because you're trying to make the situation advantageous for one side versus the other. Not that you're trying to hurt the other side, you're focusing on making it advantageous for one side. So there's differences as to what your participation would be, especially if you're pulled in early during the divorce procedures and discussing options for those parties. Normally, you're going to be a neutral. Normally, you're going to want to stay in neutral. Sometimes it's hard, but you're going to want to stay in neutral. Many times in the financial world, we are neutrals, but we will fall into advocacy. I had the one case that I'll talk about at the end. I started out as an advocate, ended up being a neutral because I ended up having to help both sides to solve the problem. And now I'm not. And when I started out giving advice to the wife, which was all about her because it was the only person I talked to, then I had to connect with the husband and the father-in-law, which is involved. Now I'm giving advice to both sides. I now have to become neutral. I cannot be guiding one way or the other to maximize one side.
You're a transaction loan officer.
I'm a transaction officer. Does that go away now with the new NAR settlement, the transaction agency and the buyer agency and the listing agency?
Mm-hmm.
Somebody asked me that the other day and I said, I didn't hear it went away. So it's still flags, right? Okay. Thanks for teaching me on that because I didn't know the answer. All right, so key considerations when you have both parties together. So this kind of goes to the conversation we started out with. What happens when you have to meet with both parties? And here's just some little advice and guidance. Keep the meeting at 60 to 90 minutes long. Longer than that, probably we aren't being productive anymore, and we're probably into the emotional side. Have a specific agenda, because remember, we're trying to lessen emotions and increase the productivity of our meeting. I like this one. This one's really, really important. Is just to create some emotional space and then rotate back between emotional conversations and non-emotional conversations. Like, if you both sell, do you need a yard? Who's getting the dog? That's probably emotional. That's a family pet that's going to be separate, right? You know, what day are we going to list the property on as far as when can you get the walls painted? That's probably not emotional, unless there's a financial strain. So flip flop before emotional and non-emotional, and then just don't mediate. Just remember they typically have professionals in the transaction. Let them mediate. Obviously, there's a lot of conversations that go on between you and the two parties that might be trying to find a way to get them to come together, and that may seem like mediation, which is, you know, gets close, but just make sure that if you get to the point where parties are kind of insurmountable, conversations can't get past, they can't get to agreement, you're probably gonna bring in the legal team. You're there to deal with the real estate. Questions or comments on any of that? Anyone need a break? We're not quite an hour in. Mitch and Dale, any statements or comments?
My only statement is I also was a witness at a court hearing, twice actually. And the point about showing up and having attorneys start talking to you, asking you questions about financing and or real estate. And the fact that their knowledge is very limited with the details and getting into the weeds, and the weeds are what's important when you start talking about things like we're talking about today. They need our help, that's the point of that, and the more education we can provide to an additional, well, there's two parts. One is selfishly, they're a resource and a referral partner to you and to us. And secondly, you're really helping the people that need the help most, that are distraught over getting a divorce, and they're really unsure about what to do. And interestingly, I met with my financial planner the other day, and he said, the biggest thing that people want to do is sell their home immediately when they get a divorce or their spouse passes away. And the advice he gives them is, you have to wait this out, think it through, don't do it yet, think about all your options. I know you're gonna need space, so I just gotta get out from this experience, and the relatability to the property and the ties and the emotional tie that Jody's talking about. But they need us, they just need the information to make really good decisions in advance of making really important decisions to then help move and propel their lives after the fact. So it's really important information, in my opinion. Again, this is why I was very happy that Jody offered to do this today, because we're gonna walk away with really, really good value information. You probably already figured out that you can take to your next opportunity, and expand your business into divorce attorneys or mediators or this other organization that do help people get through divorces. There's support groups out there, help do it as well.
Yeah, or even if you just get one of your clients to call you up about getting divorced, and you help, you're gonna be more educated on what your position is, how to help them. So there's a thing called collaborative divorce, and everyone thinks divorce is totally contentious, sometimes it isn't. This is a process that people use that actually, they may have attorneys, collaborative divorce attorneys, where everyone shares everything with everyone, and they're all work together to work through an agreement. These are normally pretty amicable. However, there's kind of a funny result in this. If this doesn't end up in an agreement, everyone needs to get new lawyers. Which when I learned that, I was like, why? And I think the reason is because at that point, everyone knows everything about each other, including the attorneys. So there's no way the attorney can remain as an advocate for their client, because they've already advocated for the other client. So I thought that was weird. So a lot of times, even though collaborative divorce is kind of a neat opportunity for everyone to come together and just try to agree, it fails, and then it's it ends up being more expensive and more difficult. What I find now is people will go through mediation, and then if the mediation fails, they would move on to court. And the mediation is with their attorneys, but everyone's still attorney for the wife is the advocate for the wife, the attorney for the other partner is the advocate for the other partner. Okay? So just so you know that's out there. All right. This is right down the pipe of what we're gonna do every day when you're dealing with someone, dealing with real estate and divorce. Sorry about my order here. So why do they want to keep the house?
Building for the kids.
Ability for the kids, preserve equity if they're forced to sell or down the market, they're giving up money.
Stick it to their ex.
What is it? Spite, yep. Vindication, spite, yep.
Also, there's work.
Or some work, yeah. You got it. Stability for children, wait for the market to improve so you don't lose equity. They use their house for their business. That's a big one. We see that a lot right now. They're like, I can't, my office, I have a separate door I put in so they can come in and come to my office, and I have to find that in another house, it doesn't exist. That's a big one.
Interest rate.
Interest rate is another big one today. That's why a lot of assumptions are happening. Close to family, friends, community work, schools, church. They want a house that fits their family pet. I know that one sounds kind of maybe not as important, but you're going through a stressful thing and you got instability and you got your pet. For me, it would be a dog, but whatever that is. And they kind of become your little therapy person in your life. And if that's a 100-pound dog, you can't necessarily go moving into a townhouse, right? So you want to keep your guard and you want to be able to keep the pet. You can't afford to buy a new house. I'm working with a couple right now that's probably going to happen. Can't afford to sell the house. That happens. Like right now, most people have a lot of equity and that's not happening, but we've certainly seen that. We think how divorces went in 2009 and 2013. If you were in that market. Don't wanna face the effort it's gonna take to sell a house. It's not a minor effort, especially to get a house ready for sale. And depending what the condition is, sometimes it's a lot of effort, and maybe they just can't take it on, they've got too much going on. I talked to a gal yesterday that's just so, after we got off the phone, she goes, oh my God, thank you so much, I guess I can sleep tonight. Because she's had 3 sleepless nights worrying about something that she talked to me about last night. Concern about an unfair split of proceeds, this is a big one. Someone's like, well, I'm not getting my fair share, my partner wants this and that's not right, or those kind of things, afraid that you're not gonna get. Now, I think he's hiding, I think that partner's hiding, I don't always need to say he's, I'm watching my brother. I think that person's hiding something, I think my partner isn't being forthcoming. Those conversations, you hear that a lot, so worried about fair split, pride and spite, and fear. Here's a biggie, you'll see that a lot. Where I'm just afraid, what if I can't buy a house, what if it's gonna be a different area, what if I can't keep my kids in the same school, that kind of stuff, so those are reasons. So can you afford to keep the house? And this is kind of funny because there's lots of considerations people don't consider. Well, yeah, I've been in the house 10 years, we're making the payment, what's gonna happen to the income potentially? Gonna get split in half. Or you're gonna have to negotiate income in order to afford the payment that has been being made 10 years. Or you've been making the income to make the payment, but you might have liability that you're gonna be paying out that you don't have today. That's the obvious one, but here's some non-obvious ones. Consider payment taxes, what do we say is happening in insurance? What's happening in property taxes? What's happening with HOAs? Yeah. So although you could maybe have qualified for the payment before, are you considering what's gonna happen next year with insurance taxes and HOAs, right? And what repairs does the house need? That goes to the condition, and we'll talk about that on a whole slide. Can they cash out to provide the equity for the outspouse? So if they can afford the house, how are they gonna get the equity, the outspouse to stay, so that the outspouse can also afford to buy a house? And sometimes when we start running those numbers, it becomes non-affordable, especially with current interest rates. There's the high interest rate, high property tax, high insurance rates, can mean higher payments in the future that sometimes they don't consider. They're considering the moment right now, and they don't look at next year. Can they even qualify for the house, and have they considered the condition? What does a new roof cost? What's a new furnace cost? $12,000. What happens when you decide to go sell your house and you decide to go check all those gutters and realize one gutter was flowing down the corner of the house and you have a slight structural problem? What's that cost? A lot. Who knows?
20K.
Who in Denver has ever seen a clay pipe that's shattered when they sell a house? So what if you find that before you sell the house? What's that cost? Alright, so what did we just do? $20,000-$30,000? So if a spouse says, I want to keep my house. And has any of a realtor ever said we live in a house differently than we sell it? Right, so who's been up on the roof lately checking out the asphalt? Anyone? How old's the house you live in?
Casey,
I've lived in my house 20.
you'd be the one.
I've lived in my house 20 years. The only time I check my roof is when it hails. 28 years, do you think I need a new roof? Probably. I'm probably on borrowed time. If I keep my house in a divorce and all of a sudden after divorce, I get a leak in my living room, that's $10,000 I gotta put out, my roof's probably $20,000. Did I negotiate that in the equity position in my split of my divorce when I just wanna keep the house? No. This is where you guys come in. Because this is stuff you guys can point out. Hey, let's look at what keeping the house looks like. How old's your roof? How old's your furnace? When does it need to be painted? When's the last time you had a structure? When's the last time you had it inspected? People look at me sideways when I say that in the middle of this. Let's get an inspection. Because let's identify what are the problems or repairs that are coming when you start to negotiate the equity split of your home. It just doesn't come up. What are the capital gains and the tax implications? We'll talk about it in a future slide. And can the outspouse be removed from the name and note? I have a whole slide on assumptions, so we'll wait until we get there to talk about it in detail. Is the home still insurable? We have 3 slides talking about this because it's a big deal. Joint tax obligations during a joint tax year. What happens when somebody owns a house, gets divorced in the same tax year, and then they decide to sell it? And now there's still a joint tax return being filed, but the spouse was removed from title. What happens to that capital gain return? I'll tell you what happens in a case study in the end of the thing. Current versus future market conditions. So what's the current market condition versus a future market condition? Is it smart to sell it now, or if you can stay in, is it better to hold the next year? Or is it better to sell it now? Because we don't know what next year is. So those are all the considerations that as a real estate agent, and is their credit adequate? I always throw that one in because this happens a lot where their credit isn't adequate to accomplish what the new financing options are, even though they want to stay. All right, so the next question is, can I afford to sell my house? And in divorce, there's going to be some stressors. What is the split equity going to look like to everybody? Who gets what proceeds? How much does the home be sold for, and what will be the cost to fix it up to get it to that condition? Right, so that's another consideration. Is there enough proceeds left to purchase a new home? Tax implications, selling now versus later. Again, we're gonna go over this in a minute, but there is a tax shift if you decide to keep it and then sell it next year. A big one. And they might want to consider that. So we might point out that it's better to sell the house now, or there might be reasons it's better to sell the house later. Higher interest rates, can they afford a new home? Is the current mortgage assumable? So that's one to consideration when one wants to keep the house and one wants to move on, but we want the mortgage off the credit and we need equity out of the house. That question's coming up almost consistently now. Enough value to liens, and make sure we know what the right liens are. How do we find liens on the property? 20 public records title, right? Do you think attorneys do all this? Not many of them do. So they go, oh, what do you owe on your house? Great. Anything else you owe? Nope. Good. That's what the liens are. That's not true. A joint tax obligation during a joint tax year versus an individual tax obligation during a when you're filing individually and singly. Condition of property, we've gone over that one. Is there mortgage insurance? That's important when we start talking about assumptions. So what's the loan structure now, and what's the assumability, and is there mortgage insurance on that mortgage payment as to whether or not we're gonna have a consideration in evaluating whether we're gonna sell or keep the house. And then it's popped up, but whatever it is, I'm sure I covered it. All right, so here's the other thing is, how are we gonna decide if they're gonna sell the house or keep the house, and who's gonna sell the house or keep the house? Who's gonna stay and who's gonna go? And a lot of times that hasn't been decided before you're pulled. So number one, the most obvious thing is who can afford to stay, right? If there's one wants to keep the house, who's the person that's gonna be able to afford it? And from a mortgage lender's perspective, that affording the house is gonna be post-divorce. And if they can't afford it post-divorce, but they can afford it right now, we might give them different guidance about what to do with the mortgage right now versus after divorce. Why would they maybe go to qualify now and not qualify post-divorce?
Well, they might qualify now without having any support or other obligations that they wouldn't qualify for after that.
Right, is there gonna be other obligations added to their liabilities that's gonna kick them off? Okay, so number one is, can they come to a mutual agreement on value? And not a lot. Can they come to a mutual agreement who's keeping the house? Are there children involved in consideration? Is there enough value in the house to buy out the other spouse, or are there other assets that can be used? With the evaluation of whether they're gonna keep the house, can the cash outs, can the out spouse's name be removed from the note and title and credit? Can the house spouse afford the all right, where the heck to go? My new little clicker, I always hit all the wrong buttons. Can the person staying in the house afford to refinance the mortgage and remove the other spouse from the mortgage? And under the consideration of the obligations that may be named in the MSA and alimony, which is what we just said, alimony and child support, tax implication if the house is sold during a joint tax year versus tax implication if the house is sold during a singular filing year. Those are all considerations of whether you can keep the house. And can we see where you might participate in some of that in the beginning? Like who's gonna keep it, what's the value? Can they decide on value? Questions on any of that? Alright, we're at about 12:05. We're gonna go till 2, but do we wanna take a break and get nutrition? And food, and do that? So what I'm gonna do is have you go ahead and get food. We'll take a quick break, and then, let's come back and we can just eat our lunch and have our beverages and I'll keep going. And then we'll get a little water.
Sounds good.
I did the professional with your salary.
Now you can go.
Flip-flops.
Now we got flip flops. All right.
I drive a manual and I had somebody be like, do you drive in houses? Like,
No,
absolutely
I
not.
drive bare feet.
I was like, I bring flip flops.
All right, yes, to.
I'll just schedule back.
And by the way, you guys will get this presentation in a flip book when we're done. So the data will be,
So is that the band?
So- I love your note taking.
I'm like, I'm like, what's something that I can look at and it'll trigger all the other things too?
Write notes and then automatically.
I do too.
So I may never look at the notes again, but then.
Well, I'm like, I have like severe ADHD, so like if I don't write it down as I'm hearing it, it'll go in one ear, right out the other.
Yeah.
Yep.
I get that.
Now you're.
Jody, did you want me to they can send somebody like a contact office
To sign that document.
Oh,
Oh, yes.
oh, this is your,
Yes.
here.
Yeah.
I'm working the screen right there. Okay,
I just don't have, like, cause there's any notary signature or something.
yeah, but it's just a release, they can just email it to you, and then I can sign it, you guys can notarize it. Don't you have to notary next first?
No, well, I don't see everybody here. They don't keep our little office or the.
Oh, well, let's ask him if there's.
Yeah.
Great idea. I didn't. No, they're not there, so. Oh, they just don't man that office.
They've gone to like just a few hours here and there.
Yes,
There's more other offices, you know, right there.
And maybe they can either I can pop down there after the presentation.
Yeah.
I don't know what to do. I have another conference call I'm on, but I can run down there real quick.
Their call, did you give them a message?
Oh, did they not go to?
Lexi he called me this morning, just to be like, here's what he has going on, can you just give me a brief overview, and we were able to like.
Oh, sweet. Sweet. All right. So I don't need that.
They were long, okay. I'm like, who was on this?
You ready to solve that?
I know, I'm like, you're here, like.
They always have that option now.
I was like, I don't know.
You have to do it without security intrusion. Yeah, I know, I don't know what happened to it.
No idea. I was like, I'm sorry, got the mail from you guys.
I didn't get anything back. I sent the whole item.
I'm like, I don't think so,
That's right, we'll just get it fixed. I don't mind.
we'll get it done, she's like,
Not the first time.
yeah,
I had to fix something up here.
yeah, sure,
Oh. Send them about this. Well, I did this one hour too. I think because efficiency over there, that's for. Oh goodness, what is all this? That, and then, you know, I'm like, as your refrigerator, what we had, and. Yes, the seller did not want to list any of that. Ahead of time, so we tested before we did that, post, you know, we had to factor. The seller to come back now, this is why. So.
I tried to do all of
The seller is in Colorado. And trying to get back to Colorado home. Right. Okay. Hopefully they can get those out.
Nicole says they'll have that document ready for you to sign, if you just pop into their little office right there. Not right here, but the one.
Just when I'm done. Yes, that'd be awesome.
Yes.
I will go do that in a time.
Yes.
Did this office move?
Yes, we used to be on front.
Yeah, you still have the front, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, because I was coming here, I was always like, okay, it's really hard to figure out where to turn the front door, and I was like, hey, this is really easy.
This is different. Okay, this is different.
I like this one.
Oh, yeah.
Or? A lot of them say phase one. Yeah. It's. We do have this signage, I did, okay, did everyone, what do you guys, okay, because I know some people had. It's great, welcome, by the way, that's not this. And then you should have a certificate, a blank certificate. Yeah. Let's see if Rich. Let's see where the blanks are. And the child, like, I saw them. Oh, great.
I think you're in that folder.
You hear? You feel like making it license. I didn't get that, but I know what you need. Let's make sure that you know, like, those. Yeah, and I think we're ready for one, so okay, I wanted to. Goal setting in and getting. Just make sure we get out on all so I can see. You don't hear my phone out, right? Yeah. And you might do that. Interesting. You guys like this? Okay.
No, yeah.
And you sign this.
Yeah, I got the agreement from where we got some work. Yeah. Yeah, but Lomo's going throwing that in.
Yes.
Yeah, all right.
And then.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, I'm really try for practice.
Ready, what's up?
No, I'll grab someone out.
I saw your email last night.
Oh,
You were welcome.
Strawberry, a couple strawberries?
No. I have water for my voice.
I couldn't get to eat. Yeah. You bet. Yeah.
Yes, I will. I'm not considering it.
Timing, but the money.
Yeah, we don't.
Hopefully it'll happen today.
So that gets accepted, we look at what an October. Best case.
Yeah. It talks about Ada, she's like very confident, that she'll have it under contract. She said to give her until the 26th. And I was like, okay, they kind of have shown even last 2 days. So let's see. See what happens.
Yeah.
It's hard when you can't control it and it's a different market.
Well, I think there's the one at Lorraine, she could get every region, I would get every region, and the referrals get every region, but that definitely.
And first.
Alex said, 3:30, so I can get over there.
All right, I'm gonna jump back in. Everyone ready? Oh, thank you. So for all of you who don't know, Mitch is my work husband. Takes care of me, brought me my sandwich, brings me my gluten-free muffin when we have other meetings in the morning. He knows I'll be left in that spare enough time to get something. Thank you, honey.
Anytime, what's for dinner?
What's that, Sean?
If you can complete these and I'll hand it my straight, sorry, I can sign for it, that way Thank you. Sir? That's. Very good.
I have my flip flops on now, so I can talk even faster.
I was wondering how long you were gonna last in those high
You know,
heels.
I come in professional for the first hour and then I can see. Used to be able to go all day and then not anymore. All right, so, we're gonna talk about appraisal, condition, insurance, title, and assumption. Lots of stuff in here that you will be very familiar with, and some you might be a little surprised about, but it's all the current market and what's occurring right now when you consider clients that are divorcing. Number one, one of the first decisions is somebody's gonna keep the house or they're gonna sell it. The property division, which I said earlier, division of property and equity split is a permanent decision. It is final. When it's made, needs to be carried out per the agreement unless there's another agreement. I like this one, don't get Zillowed. So did actually Zillow prove that they cannot actually establish the true value of a house? Yep. Right, because they thought, oh, I can come in the market and do all those, I'll just offer cash and own the house, and I have the perfect algorithm. Well, has anyone, especially in this area, know of a place where you could cross a street, the entire value of the house is different? Certainly happens a lot in Boulder, right? So it's important to understand the value, and one way we determine the value is an appraisal. Is appraisals always right? No, not. So really, I would depend on my real estate partner even over appraisal. Because you're gonna know not only the past number one, appraisals look backwards instead of forward. You're in the current market, so they're backwards 6 to 18 months. So a house that sold for one number a year ago, are we sure it's gonna sell for that number this year? No, it's not. So that's why our real estate partners are important. If we get an appraisal and it is not associated with a lender or doing a loan, it is called a GPAR, a general property appraisal report. And if we get a appraisal that is associated with doing a loan, it's called a UR, which is Universal Resident Appraisal Report. So it depends on which one we need, and sometimes we need how many appraisals? Two, because we get one, and typically one part of the divorce does not agree with it. Document all liens on the property. A mortgage statement is not enough. Why? Why is a mortgage statement enough? Because it doesn't identify other liens. What else might in a mortgage statement not identify about the mortgage? Not necessarily the payoff, escrows. What just happened with everybody's escrows? Huh. Everyone's shaking their head. Are they short? Yeah. There's shortages, right? Because tax and insurance went up. The other thing, what happened during COVID to mortgages? They went into forbearance. What happened in forbearance? You still have to pay it back. You didn't make payments for several months. There's a thing called a forbearance account or a deficiency account. That's where the interest is kind of separated off into its own account, like an escrow account, but it still needs to be paid off. Do all mortgage statements show the accumulated amount of forbearance? No. If you have a mortgage that was $900,000, how much could the forbearance balance be? What? Big, large. I've seen it. So if an attorney has got a mortgage statement in their case file, and that's considered enough for discovery, can we show them they're wrong? And many times there's a big gap there, and they're making decisions based on that. We never go off a mortgage statement for a payoff.
All right, people too forget that they do down payment assistance when they bought their house 10 years ago.
That's a great one. I need to add that on my slide. Yeah, down payment assistance.
And they have that silent lien.
And like if you use a chattel loan, there's a second mortgage out there. It's silent. They didn't have any mortgage payments, but is it still out there? Does it need to get paid off when it's sold? Did that affect somebody's equity? Does it need to get paid off when you refinance? Yep, yeah, sure does. It's a lien, I can't get rid of it, and it won't subordinate. So the down payment assistance is a huge one. Thanks, Dale. I'm gonna have to add that on my slide. It's awesome. All right, why would you get a home inspection during divorce? Does that sound silly? Does that sound like, oh my God, are you kidding me? You just want me to spend $450. You just want me to support your friend that's a property investor. I can tell you, I have seen issues post-divorce to the tune of $150,000 that would have been identified with an inspection. You think $450 or $500 sounds inexpensive after that statement? Very. So we don't live in our house like we get ready to sell our house. And when there's emotions that are high, and they're like, I don't care what you do, I'm keeping my house. And I don't care what my partner says. And I don't care what anybody says, I'm keeping my house. Can we maybe show them some situations where maybe they don't want to keep the house? Yes, we talked about them earlier. A lot of things can be identified within a home inspection. It's the easiest way to get somebody to go through and do a home inspection, and it's also a neutral third party. It's not you saying, hey, by the way, I think you need a roof and it's $25,000. It is a neutral third party saying, if I was inspecting this home for sale, these are the things that be done. It'll also be a tool for you to know what repairs and things you might want to do before putting it on the market. Because what's the buyer gonna do when they go under contract? Get a home inspection, so you're kind of already know things that have to be dealt with. In this area, you know, sewer pipes and roofs and furnaces, again. For instance, the one I have when I moved in, I've been in the house 28 years, I have no clue what's gonna go, it's gotta be close. And I would not think of that if I was dealing with emotional situation in divorce. Alright, so that's why we say get a home inspection. Alright, insurance. We just talked about the fact insurance rates are going up. Home insurance is critical. Is the house one claim away from being uninsured? Has anyone heard of a clues report?
Yep.
Alright, clues reports can be very critical to obtain even when dealing with, houses that you have buyers buying, but we don't normally do that. But definitely in this situation, because will both parties be forthcoming about a claim? I got an insurance cancellation notice on one of my rentals last week because they said I had too many claims on my roof. And I was like, well, I only had one roof replaced. But every time I mailed, I called in, had a roof inspector. So the insurance company that was the reclaim. I didn't have 3 new roofs. I didn't have any money spent the other 2 times, but the insurance company decided that was 3 claims. I didn't know that.
Just by making the call?
By making the call and having someone come check my roof.
Yeah,
Call my insurance, call the roof reversed. I didn't know that. I didn't know it was a claim. I was required. I didn't, what, I can't ask a question? Yeah, well, they called me up and said, we're no longer insuring your rent. It's in Erie. It's not like it's in the fire area of the mountains, it's in Erie. So yeah, I got my insurance claim. Yeah, I made 1 claim. I've owned the house for 26 years. My insurance was just canceled. But do you think that could affect the situation of divorce? Yes, and maybe somebody's done that stupid move during a divorce and all this, and the other spouse is gonna stay in the house, doesn't know. Have you ever tried to place insurance when normal insurance doesn't go? It's about 3-4 times the amount of expense, so it can be expensive. A clues report stays with the person for 7 years. Hate to know what mine looks like. And a house for 5. So the clues report's actually on the house as well as the person, the insured. Right, and what a clues report is a comprehensive loss underwriting exchange. So it's a big database of who's filing claims, what happened, how many, and on what houses. Right, so since I have multiple rentals and I have had claims throughout the years, I'm sure my eye on the person have a lot out there. So could I then become uninsurable? Potentially. I mean, I didn't really know that until I was researching all this for the class, so that was really eye-opening to me. It verifies the property and the homeowners if they're uninsurable. The other thing that affects insurance, Dale, one of the things that affect insurance, you did a little 5-minute presentation on that.
Credit score,
Credit score? Who knew that?
intergroup,
In the room,
previous claim,
any claims,
there was more fun.
fire mitigation measures, closest to fire, closest to in a floodplain, you know.
Yeah.
Are you close to what some past risk that they now deem you high risk and do any mitigation for it? Yeah, so experts suggest that filing 2 claims within 3 years will you'll be high risk. So anything else, I just go, can you go check all my roofs? Well, I won't do that anymore. Supposedly that's a claim. You can, a clues report can only be ordered by the homeowner or the homeowner's insurance agent. So you can't go out and get a clues report on a house. You have to have cooperation from the insured or the insurance agent. The property insurance claims tied to your name as well as the home. And you want to make sure the house is still insurable. And, you know, to tell you the truth, on my house that rental that I was just canceled on, I also had a house in the mountains which I'm moving into. And when I got insurance on that house, it was fine, but now I am changing events because I held it as a rental and now I'm moving into it. So you think the insurance agent would be all happy right now, it's my primary. my insurance agent told me I probably will not be able to retain that insurance. Because as soon as I change the status of that house, it's a qualifying event to the insurance company to be able to cancel it.
Just keep it rental.
And right, but that's because it's up in the mountains right next to Roosevelt National Forest, and it's a high risk, high fire danger area. So,
Wow.
so I already know, so what if I was going through a divorce and I got my house and then taking my spouse off insurance is a qualifying event and now they go, oh, by the way, you're no longer insured. But we give you some insurance for 4 times the amount that you're paying before.
So is that typically a qualifying event?
That's what they say, any change to your policy, the insurance reevaluates. Yeah,
Are you just gonna run it to yourself?
yeah, really. No, that's my husband. Yeah, so that's, she already warned me. So that's just why, right now, insurance companies are looking for anything to be able to either increase your premium or get themselves out of markets where they have insurance and they no longer want to be in those markets.
We had another one that the spouse was veteran, insurance with USAA. You didn't think, oh yeah, maybe I can't have USAA now, we're not married, so I have to totally agree with your insurance.
Yep, that's another one. We just crossed that one. Thanks for reminding me. That's a good example. So what's gone on with insurance expenses? Where's Colorado? Right? Wait, I have this.
Didn't show on the screen.
No, it doesn't show.
There we go.
Come on, it's my newest.
Reflection of on the screen.
It's right there.
We know where we are, right?
Geez, there's Colorado.
Purple one.
Perfect there, no,
What percentage is our insurance increase?
58%.
that's insane.
Whoa, that's a lot. You take some of these higher value homes, guys, that's a lot of money. And then if they cancel and you have to go find insurance carriers that are in your area, it can be even more. So, I had a $4 million deal, I'll tell you no lie, 8:30 at night, trying to save the buyer from backing out of the contract because of insurance. I can't tell you in my entire 44-year career, except with maybe a flood insurance issue, has that ever happened. But I was on the phone at 8:30 at night, texting a real estate agent going, he wants to get his contract because of insurance. Oh my God, we need to help him. I said, calm down, we have time, we'll find the insurance, and we did, but, he had called 5 insurance companies and they would not insure him because he was in an area called Pembroke Hills in Boulder, which is foothills of the mountains. And all the carriers are pulled out. All right, title liens. Who knows anything about title liens? Are there title liens that can happen? Remember we talked about clouded title? So there's the obvious ones like the mortgage, home equity lines of credit. How about like a judicial lien? Has anyone seen that pop up on title? How about tax lien? Has anyone experienced that? Tax liens. The one thing about tax liens that I think are really important to note, a lot of times people don't know they're out there. And so in a divorce, if you're not checking liens and nobody knows, so it didn't come up in discovery, and someone keeps the house and has 6 months to refinance or a year or 2 years to refinance, what happens to that tax lien after 2 years of divorce? Does it go away?
Still there.
It's still there. And oh, guess what? If that person's the one on title, do you need to check title to file a quitclaim deed and get the other person off title? No, you don't. Oh, you can file anything you want on that title without checking title. The only time you check title is when somebody with collateral position wants to check that title, or a new owner wants to make sure they are, they have clean title, which obviously we do through a title company. You can file all day long quitclaim deeds and change title without checking title.
That's scary.
All it means is chronologically that recording sits behind the recordings that all happened before it. So what happens with someone that says they want to keep the house and then they file a quitclaim deed and the spouse is off the house and they're in the house 2 years later, you're like, okay, my divorce decree says I have to refi, get your good, I'm gonna refi, let's go. What do you mean I have $100,000 IRS lien on my title? Yeah. Try working that one out when the other spouse has already moved on and remarried. Yes. Okay, I'll let you decide what happened with the rest of that story. So John, mechanics liens. Here's one that not a lot of people know about. UCC liens. What the heck's that? Solar. What is it?
Solar. Usually solar panels.
Solar panels can file UCC lien, what else can file UCC lien?
So can hot tubs, so can pools, and it's uniform.
Yeah. And also, what happens to borrowers through COVID? What happened during COVID? We all started working from home. So if they file a license for their business from that home address, and that business carries any kind of liability, that can file UCC lien if that liability goes delinquent. Have you ever looked up a tax record and it says Jody Showman, 229 Stony Hill Road, and it says ABC Inc., 229 Stony Hill Road? There's a whole nother little state tax lien in there. That would be a company. You'll see it on the tax records where they filed their company lien under their company tax under their house. It can end up filing UCC lien. Again, things that happen that you may not deal with every single day, but we've seen on title. HOA, because they file a lien? Yes. And where it happens with an HOA or a tax lien, then it sits on title.
It's way up there.
It's a superior lien to a mortgage lien, called super liens. IRS is the top, or I guess tax is the top, HOA is the second, mortgage collateral is the third. An NED. What's that?
Notice of election demand.
Notice election demand, what's that mean?
They're heading into foreclosure.
They have a default situation. Do you wanna know that before we start proceedings?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, that's important. List pendants, what's that? Filed on a title so no one can do anything. Nobody can make a move. Do you know that a lis pendens can be filed during a divorce by one party in order to stop the other party from making it? Typically takes a court order to get a lis pendens, right? But this is the way, if you guys are like, okay, great, you're gonna buy her, let's go, and give them lis pendens on their title. What do you have to do? Can the guy go, oh, forget it, we're good, we sold it, let's just clear it. You have to go to court, the court has to clear that lien. You can't just clear it, it has to be cleared by the court. So could that delay closing? Yes, clouded title, we talked about the other day, I think people on title, it shouldn't be. Cross security, here's another biggie I see. Again, associated with businesses. Hey, I need $1 million business for my loan. Sure, I'll guarantee it. Well, do you have any collateral? My house. Oof. I got my house. Just go ahead and send it. When everything's happy in that marriage, is that an okay thing? Probably. When everything isn't happy as a marriage, that causes a problem, can cause a huge problem. Because guess what? If there's no other collateral, how do I get that lien released? I gotta probably go back to that commercial lender and have them agree to have him just guarantor and either securitize some other asset or release the security instrument. You think that's easy? Not always. So we've seen that. Inaccurate legal description. I dealt with this one just 2 months ago. We filed a lien on a title, and because of an error in title, we actually accidentally, on a refi, filed the lien against 2 different units together. One was the buyer's commercial unit, and one was the buyer's residential unit. And we lent on the residential unit, and the commercial unit should never have been included. But the title company pulled up the title incorrectly because there had been a previous error in title, and they pulled up the wrong title. They didn't pull up the correction. I don't know if the legal description is not my job to figure that out. This title company, we depend on them. So in this case, it was a sale, but did I have clouded title? Major. What happens when I have an inaccurate legal description? What do I have to do? It's not change legal. Yeah, so first of all, I have a mortgage on this property. The mortgage company has to be involved. In this case, it was encumbering 2 properties where it should have been encumbering 1. I have to get the mortgage company, I have to convince the mortgage company to issue me a partial release for the unit that should have never been encumbered in the first place. But what are they worried about? They're worried about their value position, their loan to value, their equity. But wait a minute, I'm releasing part of a collateral that I have a lien on, and you're just asking me to partially release that off? What did the appraisal appraise? So you can see it wasn't easy. We did get it done, thankfully. And the property was for sale, but we didn't have that in divorce. And you need cooperation from all parties. It can be very ugly. So by the way, this stuff all happens, and has happened to me. I've seen most of this. Property tax certificate, making sure we understand what the taxes are. Are they delinquent? Are they current? 24-month chain of title, what does that show?
Who's been the owner for the last 2 years?
Anything of record that is reported on that property for the last 24 months. That can be really important when somebody's filed a lien that no one else knows about. Or when one spouse has filed a lien that the other spouse doesn't know about. O&E is that's how we find liens when we don't do a title policy. And just a note, payoffs, mortgage statements are not sufficient. Okay, that one's important because mortgage statements do not show everything.
Can you give an example of mechanics one?
Yeah, someone goes out and gets some work done and said, well, I have this same situation, they're not satisfied with their work, and I'm not paying them. And the contractor goes, you have to pay me, I have a contract. And I say, well, I'm not happy with the work, come back and fix it, I don't have time to come back and fix it, you're being unreasonable. I'll just file a mechanics lien. And this happens a lot with contractors from both sides, sometimes the person who engaged the work is the one that's not being fair, and sometimes the contractor's not being fair, and I don't mean to indicate it's always the contractor, because it's not. But the contractor has the right to file a mechanics lien if they can prove they did work on the house, and then they just wait it out. They can wait out until the house sells or refinances, and then they typically get their money. They can also get a judgment, but they can just file a mechanics lien.
Anybody seen that in listings? It's not how often that's happened.
It doesn't happen a lot. I mean, I haven't seen it in a while. You know what, it did happen a lot was out of 2008, when people had to get things fixed, they were sold and they couldn't pay, and then they were short. And,
Isn't there an expiration time?
For mechanics.
there is some kind of
There's-
statute
I
and
have some
timeline.
call with one with an attorney, and he said, if we wait long enough, they
They
can't,
could wait it out.
they
collect
can't,
on it.
they can't come back and collect on it.
Yeah.
It's been years, but I was involved in one, and I remember the attorney saying that.
There is something like that. I don't know what those laws
Yeah.
are, but yes, there is some
Yeah.
rules on that. I do remember, after 08, we had a lot of contractors that did work that filed a mechanics lien to make sure they were involved in the negotiation of the short sale. That was the way they could protect getting paid. Another reason, if they know a client might be filing bankruptcy, if they found this property, it's gonna potentially secure their debt or give them more leverage. So that's when we see a mechanics lien payment. Normally, it's a disagreement between the work done and the payment to be paid, and that gets.
So I'm just gonna add to that, if Google's correct, it says 6 months for mechanics lien, it's an expire. Or for the last time work, or any kind of material was delivered to the property.
6 months.
That's so short.
That's all.
So probably a lot of times if people find a mechanics lien, they also then probably have to take that's like small claims court or some kind of court to get a judgment lien. So they would maybe file a mechanics lien as the first pass and then escalate that up. All right, let's talk about assumption. Why are assumptions such a popular these days? The interest rates. So people are getting divorced and like, I don't want to give up my 254 rate. So what is an assumption?
You take over the loan where it is.
Take over the loan where it is by yourself, right? So an assumption releases the liability of the other party from that note. And it requires the bank or mortgage servicing company to agree. It has to be approved. When it's approved, in cases except for, I'll tell you in a minute, then the one person that was originally on the note is released from the note, and only the only one person is left on the note. They just assume the loan and they are now fully liable. Assumptions on conventional, what are the rules, the written guideline rules, Mitch, about conventional loans being able to be assumable?
Just a couple. One is if you're getting to books. You can apply to see if in fact you get a heavy release, which is difficult to do.
I like that you can apply to see. Why? Why do you say it that way?
Guarantee here that they're gonna release
There
it.
is no written conventional mortgage assumption rule. So there isn't, when you go into conventional mortgage, there is no disclosure that says, oh, and by the way, if you want to assume this, here's the rules. Is there with VA and FHA? Yes. And there used to be, on some adjustable rate mortgages, there might be some assumption verbiage in the days gone by. I'll say the old days, because I was around then. Not anymore, really. So FHA and VA have specific language when you take out a loan, how and who can assume the loan. The conventional does not. With the equity position that most people are in for the last several years they own their house, what's the odds their loan is conventional? Large. So we're depending on the bank or the mortgage servicer to allow them to do that. And the one reason they would allow them to do that is divorce. Sometimes. And I put a note, they're taking up to 120 to 180 days to process, and then they're declining them. So if an attorney writes a marital settlement agreement that like 90 days, you'll have your, the spouse off the liability mortgage, is that realistic?
No, it's
No.
not even an option.
And does it give us any time to after it gets declined? No. So I can refinance it once it gets declined, but I don't have enough time. So one thing I'm advising attorneys and mediators is you gotta give us more time. You can't do a 90-day window right now, unless they're agreeing to refinance day one. It's a for refi application, we've done mortgage planning, we know they qualify, we've looked at their credit, we've looked at title, we know we can perform, 90 days, go for it. But shy of that, we don't have enough time. So that is something that I've been guiding attorneys and mediators on almost every phone call I'm taking right now. So on a VA, it allows for a qualifying or a non-qualifying assumption, and a non-vet can qualify for an assumption, not just the vet. So the spouse, even though the spouse might not be a vet, the spouse can qualify for the VA assumption. What happens when the spouse qualifies for the VA assumption is not a vet?
I didn't realize you could do that.
I didn't either.
But what happens? What happens to the vet VA loan?
They're
They still,
entitled.
they're,
Go ahead.
aren't they still responsible for that? You're close. They're not liable for the loan.
me, I forgot what I was gonna say. The elder spouse doesn't get relief, their eligibility doesn't
Yes,
get
got it,
it.
right. So can that go on now and get another VA loan?
No.
No, because even though they're off the note and they're no longer obligated to pay the mortgage, their eligibility, which is the term we use in VA, is not released. So they don't have
most people wouldn't.
eligibility. It depends on if they're getting a big chunk of equity, they don't need VA.
Mm.
A lot of times, no, they don't want their VA stuck. They might agree to leave it stuck for a short period of time. But even in a VA assumption, if the person that's doing VA is a non-vet, then the VA eligibility is not restored to the vet. So that person, if that person's the out spouse, they cannot use VA to go buy their house. That's really important to know if you're dealing with a VA person getting divorced, because you can guide them, right? And their attorney. Do you think the attorney knows that rule? No. So, I'm dealing with a VA right now in divorce, and, the spouse has said that VA eligibility can stay tied so that the wife can assume the VA, for a short period of time. We got a timeline on it. So that's one to know. FHA loans are assumable. They typically require qualifying. And a lot of times what happens in divorce is everyone thinks, well, fine, they'll qualify, fine, I'm paying them alimony, child support, or I'm paying spousal support. But it's not enough or doesn't fit the guidelines to qualify. And so FHA comes back and says, no, because you don't qualify. So now you gotta start with it, okay? And then conventional has absolutely no written rules. It's all based on the servicer. And most of the responses are either, no, we don't do that, or send it in and we'll see. That's it, that's all you're gonna get. And then they see. And they're gonna look at whether or not they qualify for the mortgage on their own, plus all their other debts, any of the post-divorce obligations. So assumptions are a big topic right now, and I'll tell you what, for me, if I have a client that says, no, I don't need you, I'm gonna assume, I'll say, I'll stay in touch. Because in about 4 to 5 months, what's probably gonna happen?
Maybe do.
They're gonna get declined, and I'm gonna step in and be able to refinance them. Because we still have a marital agreement that says, don't remove the spouse from obligation by a certain time. And that either means refinance or assumption. So I stay very close in contact with my clients requesting assumption. I also guide people how to apply for assumption, even though I don't get any benefit from that. I do guide them how to apply. I have a gentleman right now who has a 10-month gap of employment. And I'm guiding him how to apply, because if he just sends it in and doesn't do anything about it, they will deny him. And I'm trying to help him get approved. And down the road, hopefully I will have earned his trust to help him in any financing needs he's in the future, because I will not get any benefit from the assumption. Questions on assumption? It's a lot.
I actually have a quick question on the VA entitlement, and that, is there also, when you go to your spouse, is that different for having personal entitlement, buy their home with VA?
So it depends, yeah, VA has entitlement and number, and the entitlement is driven by the towns in which they're purchasing. So there's a calculation that says, I bought a house in Indiana, and it was only worth 300,000, so I only used this much entitlement. Now I'm buying a house in Boulder, and here's my entitlement. You can actually subtract the entitlement that's stuck, and they can use VA with the entitlement that's left. So there is a way to do 2 VAs and use the remaining entitlement. It's just normally in this market, there isn't enough entitlement to get them into a 0 down home that meets the market prices currently. Then there's a gap, so they can still use their VA, but they need a large down payment. And in many cases, it doesn't benefit them use VA. Okay. All right, that was assumptions. Did you learn anything on that one? I learned stuff on that one when I was researching it, every time I say it. Yeah, so I learned a lot on that one too. And I deal with it every day now, I'm talking to people on divorce and. All right, how can divorce damage your credit? Let's count the ways.
Financially or personally?
Well, I think the ironic thing is, what was the very first topic that came up when I said, what causes divorce?
Money.
Money, finances, right? So if there's finances that cause the divorce, do you think there's a high risk of credit harm during divorce? Big, because either it was financially motivated, or have you ever seen anyone be vindictive during a divorce?
No,
Or
never.
just break up? Well, I'll show you. I just won't make agreement. And believe it or not, I've seen it even though it harms the person not making the payment too. Or have you guys ever sold a house and the client says, well, I'm going on the mortgage, my wife's just going on title? Never happened. It happens all the time. So now what if the spouse, if the person staying in the house and their temporary order says she's responsible for making the mortgage payment every year?
But she's not on the line.
She's not on the law.
Guess what?
Guess what? Whose credit does she have full control over?
The ex, the,
Her spouse.
uh,
And if that person gets a little vindictive, can they totally mess up the other person's credit majorly? And right now, because of rates low, I'm seeing a lot of marital settlement agreements that are allowing the spouse to stay on title or on the loan for a certain number of years, so that they don't have to refinance out of the low rate and crank up the house payment. And all I ask that other spouse that's moving out and moving on is, do you understand that your credit is in the full control of that other person? And are you feeling comfortable that that will be protected? Because it's a really important question to ask. Because a lot of times they don't understand that if there's one mispayment, one mistake, or one reason that they decided to get ticked off and not make a payment, you will no longer qualify for what you want to move forward with. A lot of times there's no knowledge of some debt during divorce. That's a biggie. Actually, that happens just during applications. I've had spouses going, oh, what's all this credit card? We don't have all that. And you're like, oh. I had a refi blow up when the child support was not done with disclaimers that the spouse paid child support and the wife didn't know he had a child.
Oh.
Yeah, that one didn't close. Yes. So there's lots of things that come out during this process that you realize, I'm going ahead, so I can tell you so many great stories from my career. That come out during this process that maybe one partner doesn't know or not, and a lot of this is things to be aware of. This is more on our side of the house that we would see, but it does affect your side of the house. So, FICO score, what's that? Credit, so did we have FICO score in 1999 for you that were in? It's just coming out of then. We didn't do it, so when we used to do mortgages before, we wrote up a cover letter and said, you know, mortgage payments are paid well, low debt to income, residual income, we wrote everything about credit, we didn't have a score. Now we just have a box and it has a number in it, you know, and everything around lending is driven off that box and that number. There's 3 numbers and we actually take the middle number. But, so it's a really easy way to figure out people's credit. However, what happens with the score when, this is gonna be just an example of the FICO. What happens with the score when bad things happen? It goes down. How do we fix it? Time.
Make payments, do
On time.
good things.
Early payments.
Do the right thing.
Yeah. So if something gets harmed during divorce and we have a timeline to fix something, qualify somebody for a replacement home, do we know we have that time? No, many times not. So here's
Jody, can I ask a quick question? When they pull credit and it's 3 different scores, why are they always so different?
Yeah, that's a great.
I had somebody ask me that the other day and I wasn't really sure the exact answer.
I want you to see that.
Sure, so different creditors report to different bureaus. And the reason why we get all 3 is to make sure we get a cross reference of all the different credits and the different bureaus that they're being reported to. So you will see one who has, say, a collection account that got reported to TransUnion, but not to Equifax. You got this huge disparity of score. You know, why is it so extreme? Neither look at it, go, oh, I can tell, so this one I was only reported there.
I see.
So that's one of the main reasons. Interestingly enough, when it comes to looking at mortgage rates, Fannie Mae actually averages the 3 scores, they add them together and divide by 3. So 2 are really high, one's really low, actually 2 are okay, and one's really high, sometimes it puts them over that 680 threshold to get a better rate. But if the middle score is 660, that's what we see, and we go, oh, we have 660, let's see why, compared to a 710. So that's mainly the reason. Anything you would want to like that?
No, that's pretty much it. Depends on which bureau they're reported to and what's all reported. So this is the prediction of success of relationship. I like it, but it does point out some kind of factual things, which is behavior with credit and debt. If that is very far apart at the beginning of the relationship, it's probably gonna get further apart during the relationship. Who here that has ever dated, either now or before they were married or engaged or otherwise, said, yeah, I like you. Can I just check your credit score before? Because I just need to know if we're compatible.
Sure.
Probably not. Do you think some people should?
Yes. Probably.
Potentially.
I just had it happen to me.
There you have it. It's,
I met a lady and we went out a couple of times and next thing I knew, she knew everything about me. Oh. Everything
Full
about
background report.
oh,
FBI.
she must be a mortgage lender. Not a money to that service.
State attorney.
Did she go out with you again?
I cut it off. Yeah.
So what's your deal? Yes, but we don't, but.
Let's around the 60 kind of. Wait a minute. What she wants it for?
That's the best story of the day.
No, I'm telling you, it happened to me. You can't make that stuff
And it
up.
should happen more. I know it doesn't sound romantic, but I can tell you, in my household, I like to go shoe shopping. And when I go shoe shopping, I have a little pattern that I bring home probably more pairs of shoes than I should, or certainly more than I need. And I just leave them in the hatchback of my car. And then when I decide, oh, I'm gonna wear those new shoes, I just get dressed I found an old pair of shoes, and I get in my car and I switch to my new pair of shoes, and I go, "Oh, they're just in my house, and they're not new, and I didn't have to get rid of the shoebox, and I don't have to answer to my husband. How many shoes have you got?" Now, I can afford my shoes, and I don't put them on credit that would affect our financial picture, but I just don't want to hear the question. So, what happens if that happens in a situation where I can't afford the shoes and I'm going into debt?
Yeah.
Those kind of behavioral things, my little shoe in my trunk, can cause some pretty big financial issues, and we've seen it. And a lot of, I always used to say, and I still say this today, when we look at borrowers with credit problems, 90% of credit problems are character, not credit. So 90% of problems are more habits and concept of credit, and concept of debt, and concept of financial wealth, and concept of getting ahead in the future. That's more character than it is, I had this really hard time, I got out of college, I was poor, I had no job yet, and I couldn't pay the bills. Those are much less prevalent than character. So if you consider credit character, then you can see how maybe you could predict a relationship being successful with a credit score, but maybe you should tell your potential partner that you're gonna pull their credit score. And I don't know, there might be a way to describe that romantically, I'm not sure. Maybe over a candlelit dinner. Hey, honey, I pulled your credit score, not so good, can we have a chat?
I don't think it was a credit score so much, I think it was a background check.
Yeah, sure.
I don't know.
It is weird how much you can find on people.
Yeah.
So
And she told me, at dinner, she goes, oh, by the way, I know this. What? Okay. Yeah, that's a true story. This happened.
It's true that she cared a lot.
Well, I don't know if she cares, well, maybe she was just interested in knowing who I was.
Maybe, it is.
Yeah, she doesn't have for red flags and shake hand and red flag.
Yeah, either that or she was looking. So,
Yeah.
during divorces, there's lots of opportunity for sabotage.
Oh,
Yeah.
completely.
Have you ever seen or worked with couples or in a situation where you would worry that that would happen?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of anger, a lot of fear, sometimes it happens because I've seen this where one divorcing partner is so afraid that the other one's gonna try to take advantage of them, that they sabotage it so they can't. And it hurts them too, but they just do it out of fear.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird, lots of behavioral things. I think the key is, which I found too, is if the attorney or mediator is pulling us in as an expert early, and we can get planning going early, we can dispel a lot of those fears early and save a lot of these mishaps. But they do happen. A late payment caused a big drop of credit score. I'm gonna show you a chart in a minute. That's really interesting. Assuming all parties play fair, it might be a bad assumption. There is sometimes collaboration, but has anyone been dealing with anyone in a situation where it's all amicable for a minute? And then it's not, because they're like, what do you mean you want the dog? My dog? I had a dog before I even met you. You didn't have a dog. And all of a sudden, the whole collaboration and amenable behavior is over, right? So it happens during divorce. A lot of times people stop making payments. One is, they stop making payments maybe because they think it was the spouse's debt. Like, well, I didn't charge that credit card, I'm not making a payment, but it's like, you're joint on it. But that person didn't tell me I was joint on it, it doesn't matter, so to mess up your credit, you gotta make the payment. A really smart thing to do is freeze accounts. So a lot of times, I'll see people going through the process of divorce, and if a divorce is going to a court case, how long can it take?
Very long.
Years, definitely months, right? So if you're not in control of your credit for months, is that risky? Oh, completely, super risky. And if there's not money out of equity, is there's always ability to just, oh, that's a joint debt, I'll just pay it off so that I can't get harmed by it? No, but there's been situations where I've advised the person going into divorce to get their own credit card and roll the balance over to their own individual credit card to protect their credit. Which is kind of a drastic thing to do, but again, Can the attorneys involved in a divorce, demand everyone protect each other's credit? Nope, you can't, not unless it's court ordered, and even if it's court ordered, you said we'll have to follow it. No, we can tempt the court, but it doesn't mean they don't do it anyways. So seen a lot with this. Freezing accounts is really important. The other thing I advise people when I first talk to them is get a bank account that is only in their name, assuming they're not violating any portion of the process of divorce that they're in, right? So I don't advise them until I know what process they're in, but if they're just even talking about it, I think this is coming. Get your own bank account that is not joint. Not to hide money, not to separate things, but when you're in the joint account, you're gonna need money through this divorce, and if you don't have money of your own, it can get really stressful if everything's in a joint account. And oh, by the way, the joint account, who has access to take money out of the account? Both sides.
Right.
So if the money's in the account there to make a mortgage payment and the other partner decides, I'll just take the money. Now how do you make the mortgage payment? Yeah. So that happens all the time. So again, accounts and credit, yes, there's lots of opportunities. That's just looking before you go. So credit is a big thing. A lot of our job in doing mortgage planning is advising on preservation of credit. And bottom line, knowing what's a joint debt. Do you know that a lot of people don't know if they're joint or not on a card? We'll pull credit report and we can determine joint, authorized signer, and individual. So we can tell them these cards are joint, these are at risk at, we need to protect these. And we'll advise the legal team of that. So this is interesting. So column C, if someone had a 680 or 780 credit score, and there's one late mortgage payment, look what happens to the score. Ooh, 660. It's 120 points. And then if it's 90 days, look at the difference between one 30-day and 90-day. It doesn't look like it all that much worse for a 90-day. That 30-day hit just takes you out.
Yeah.
What do you think the interest rate looks like for the client that's got a 780 versus the client that has a 660? A whole different ballgame. How could that affect the affordability of refinancing or staying in the house or getting a house and then mortgage? Big time. It affects you big time. So one late payment is super damaging. And then how long does it take? Can you use my little pointer? How long does it take to recover from a 30-day late payment? Probably a year.
3 years.
3 years. 3 years to bring that score back up. And I don't know if any of you have ever worked with clients that are in credit repair. We work with them all the time. It takes a minute to plummet their score, and it's a lot of work and a lot of time and a lot of manipulating what they're doing to bring it back up. It just is really hard. So 1 minute, at one time, as soon as there's a hit to score, it causes the damage. And can I just then go to FICO and say, oh, it was just a bad divorce? Can I fix that? We can't do anything unless it's an error.
I'm sure you don't know the exact reason, but like, why is it so damaging so quickly and so hard to repair it back up with things like that? Like, why is it so disproportionate?
Yeah, because scoring is based on trend data over time.
Okay.
And but the harm, the hit, the late payment is kind of a current active event right then and there. So you're taking trend over history and having a bad current event. And then in order to say, well, is that just an anomaly or not? It needs a lot of trend data to pull it back up. Interesting. So why do we get harm credit? Well, miscommunication, that's a big one. It's not always malice, guys. It is sometimes with miscommunication. Unknown joint debt, that's another biggie. Obviously, if you have financial inadequate, unequal behavior around debt, somebody might be hiding some debt. Dissension, just not agreeing with each other, not talking to each other, not wanting to be nice to each other. Financial difficulty, sometimes you just can't make the payments. What other liability is coming up during divorce? Attorney fees, are they cheap? No. So is there extra expense going on top of the financial difficulty? Absolutely. Lack of cooperation, vindictiveness and spite. And unknown means a HELOC that's out there that the spouse took out that the other spouse doesn't know about. And not getting paid. We also have the ATM effect of it in HELOC, where there's a HELOC out there, one spouse doesn't know, the other one's using it like an ATM during divorce. They're just drawing equity. Yeah, we call that the ATM effect. And right there's a statement, credit harm during divorce cannot be ignored or fixed. In the old days, before credit scoring, we still just write a letter in our cover letter. So the credit looks bad, but it was just the bad divorce. And the husband was responsible or the wife was responsible, and then they didn't pay. And now the divorce is over, it's all okay. And the underwriter go, oh, I understand that, we'll do that. Now that it's FICO scoring, doesn't matter.
So that shows the impact of a 30-day late payment if it's a mortgage payment. What's the level of impact on a 30-day late on a car loan or a credit card? Is that got the same impact on a credit score that the mortgage does?
It will drop it, but no, it doesn't have quite the same.
Is it because it's less amount of debt?
Normally it's because it's just the weight it's given in a credit score. And a lot of other factors will take into effect. If there's a late payment on a credit card and it had a $25 balance versus a $10,000 limit and have less weight than if the credit card was zero for, 5 years and all of a sudden it went from $0 to $5,000. Now you got trending debt increase plus a late payment. Now you get the credit scoring system can tell you're in stress, right? You went from a $25 balance to a $5,000 balance and then you let it go late. There's an issue going on and the credit scoring will reflect that. All right, so that's an interesting chart. So things to help when you're talking to people in divorce. I always ask about joint and individual bank accounts. I always ask, is there joint debt? I always ask who's supposed to be responsible to pay them. Who can monitor payments? This is a huge one, guys. How many times do people call us and say, my husband's on a mortgage, I'm not, and he's making it, or no, they do it back. We're both on the mortgage, he's staying in the house, but he's gonna make a payment. Well, how do you know he's making a payment? If you're not in the house, and you're not seeing mortgage statements. Make sure you can log online and monitor the mortgage payments. And I tell people to do this all the time, guys, keep an eye on it. Don't just assume just because someone said they were going to. Open lines of credit, advice, close them. Close them so they can't be used like an ATM. Unless it's mutually agreed upon they're gonna be used for divorce expenses, then there needs to be an early temporary order and agreement of how they're gonna be used. Credit cards, mortgage payments, property tax payments. It's another big one. Mortgages, there's no mortgage maybe. And who's paying the property taxes or home insurance premiums while we're dealing with all this other stress and a mess? We've had insurance premiums lapse because just no one was watching the house. HELOC statements, what do they show and are you getting access to them if you're not living in the house and they're coming in the mail? How are you knowing what's going on with that debt? And other billing account statements and our statements online or mail. All the things when we work with a client and we know that there's joint debt, we're gonna ask the client and at least educate them on how to monitor their stuff to protect and preserve their credit. But also to see if there's things that can be done to avoid their credit getting hurt. And there are some things that when they get an attorney involved that they can do. And then financial mismanagement, manipulation, or abuse. Again, more something we would see than you would see, but finances can be used to manipulate or control. And I'm actually in a divorce case right now where it is happening. And it's really, really hard to be that person's, and I'm the advocate for the wife. I'm not working on the husband's side at all. And it's really hard to take her phone calls every other day and her 15 texts. And I mean, I'm not even doing a mortgage for her yet. I'm just on slide of communication because she's afraid. And it's constant control.
I have a question. So kind of talking about like the credit harm part of this, like what if somebody is co-signed on like say a car or something like that, but they're not with that person anymore. And then that person starts making payments, like it's obviously gonna hit their credit too. Like I have a client who's looking to buy a house and he just found out his ex started paying on that car. So now his credit's just getting hit. So he can't purchase anymore. Like if it's something like that, like is there any sort of recourse in loans like that that he can, you know, either ask for it to be refinanced or,
Yeah, he's gotta get off the debt.
yeah,
He's gotta either go to the creditor and say, I'm not in possession of this vehicle,
okay,
and by the way, they're not gonna do it, because
Right,
it's no
because-
fault.
right,
It just depends on, yeah, that's just unfortunately, it's an irresponsible thing to do with his credit, is
Mhm.
probably with his or her credit. They're probably trying to be nice to the other person,
mhm,
but there's absolutely nothing they can do to get off that debt.
gotcha,
Or get a court order to get the asset sold and get the debt paid off.
gotcha, so basically at this point, it's like, pay it yourself so you don't mess up your credit and
Yeah,
hope
you
that
need
you
to
can get
just
off
try
of
to
it.
stop the problem, and there's probably some, what we used to call Alt-A or A- credit loans, or now called non-QM,
Uh-huh.
that would still give them an opportunity to refinance. There is still manual FHA loans that can be done, so FHA does go out of the box and do a manual underwrite. And with extenuating circumstances, we can sometimes get an FHA loan through, depending on just how bad it is.
Okay, gotcha, I know that it's like just past 30 days, cause he saw it hit immediately.
It just depends on his credit
Uh-huh.
score and what he can do about it.
Gotcha.
We have to also, when you have a credit problem with that, we have to have a reason to give, what's gonna stop it from getting worse. We can't just go, oh, it's the other person, it's not him, and we give him a loan, we have to say what's gonna rectify the problem.
Gotcha, good to know, thank you.
All right, tax online title for bankruptcy and equitable distribution, this is gonna be quick. I am not a CPA, I'm not a tax accountant, and I cannot give any financial advice, tax advice or information that is worth anything, but I'm gonna give you some things about what I know. Capital gain waiver is $250,000 per individual, as long as you lived in your primary residence 2 of the last 5 years and you've not sold and used your gain waiver on any other house in those 2 years, right? So if you have a married couple and each person gets $250,000 and they sell a house, they get a $500,000 gain waiver. What happens when they get divorced and one person keeps the house?
They lose 50.
Yeah.
Back to 250, right?
Yeah, and they give, let's say they have $250,000 equity and they give that to their ex-spouse, and then they sell 3 years later. What happens to their gain? They get a $250,000 gain waiver now, and they pay tax on the rest of the differential between what the acquisition cost and the gain was. And does the IRS go, oh, but you gave $250,000 to your ex-spouse, so we'll just take that off? No, that is a non-taxable event. So they just dropped their tax protection by $250,000. Do you think that is something a realtor might talk to a customer about whether or not they want to keep or sell the house while jointly owned? Yeah, it's a big one. Tax implication, really big. So it's reduced to $250,000. If the other spouse lived in the marital home for 2 years and is not removed, so in other words, the one divorcing spouse stays on title, and then they sell later, the IRS does let you still have that $250,000 gain waiver for both people even though they're divorced, if that person hadn't sold another primary residence in the last 2 years. So there is a provision that they do stay on, they can maintain that waiver. I see that a lot, that people are getting divorced and their kids are like close to graduating. You know, they're just gonna stay in the house for 18 months and then sell it to keep the kids stable. I see that happen a lot. Cash out refinance or equity payout does not create a taxable event. There's not taxes paid or deducted on either side. Transfer of property between the spouses also does not create a taxable event. So if you sell a house to a person that you're not related to or married to, does that get identified as whether or not you have gains or losses or whatever? Yes. But if you just sign the house over to your ex-spouse, no record, no gain, no loss, nothing. So it's not a taxable event. Split of assets do not create a taxable event unless the assets have to be liquidated to split. Unless an IRA is split, distributed into a non-retirement account. There's a term called a quadro, I think is what attorneys call it. There's a formal name for it. I don't know if I could have qualified distribution, retirement, something. And if there are one spouse is distributing retirement accounts as part of the asset distribution, if it goes into another retirement account, of the ex-spouse, then there is no tax of the distribution of the IRA or 401k. And that happens a lot. It's a court document, has to be filled out, has to be filed exactly as, it goes to that for, it's like a rollover. If anyone's done a rollover, they do it like rollover. The amount of the loan held on a house does not affect what the capital gains tax is. Does everyone know the difference? It doesn't matter what your debt is. This matters what your acquisition costs and sales are. If a marital home is sold in years subsequent to divorce and the spouses agree to split the deduction for the mortgage interest or property taxes paid on the home until it's sold, that is allowed. So in other words, if one's staying in the house and one's moving out, but maybe the spouse that moves out wants to still take the deduction for the mortgage interest and the taxes, maybe it's more beneficial on that person's income, they can do that. Or they decide to remain on years after the one spouse has moved out. One spouse moves into a rental property and this one's interesting, and later sells that house. And even though it's their primary, there may still be tax implications for the non-qualified time they own that house. So a lot of times people think, oh, I just moved into my rental, but now it's my primary, so I just get my full gain waiver. A lot of times that's not true. And even if that is true, there may be the recapture of depreciation from their tax return that they're gonna have to recapture and pay. So a lot of times this will happen when people have more than one real estate. I'll just move into one house and move into the other, but the tax implication of that should be evaluated by a tax accountant, not me. And then other instruments can be used through a divorce to lower tax obligations and or help qualifying after divorce, like a trust. And I'll show you a case study where I did that. Make sure you have a tax professional part of the team, because anything I say is not worth it. If there is IRS problems, there is a lot of resources, and here's some of the resources that the IRS gives people, especially ones, innocent spouse release, I like that one, or relief, sorry, and then other help when there's bankruptcies and divorce and separation that affect taxes. All right, alimony. Alimony prior to 2017 was tax deductible by the payer and taxed by the recipient. In 2017, which went into effect in 2019, under the Tax Cut and Reform Bill, the taxpayer no longer gets a tax deduction. That put a big burden of spousal support shifting from the taxpayer or from the tax recipient to the taxpayer. Because now he paid that person, shouldn't say he, I don't know who's paying it, sorry. The person paying it paid tax on the income they earn, and they don't get no tax deduction for giving it to somebody else. So it's a big shift. Changes just shifted the tax burden, and it's a big effect. And then child support has never been tax deductible. Typically in the state of Colorado, it ends when the child turns 19 unless there's special circumstances agreed to extend it. Child support in Colorado is just calculated on the income, shared income calculation and spousal time, custodial time. There's not a lot of negotiation on child support. People say, oh no, I'm getting so much jobs. Like, you know what, it's a form, it's a mathematical calculation, it's driven by the state. Unless there's voluntary agreements that differ, it is basically a given what it is, based on who's got the children for what amount of time and who makes what income. And it is not taxed by the recipient, it's not deductible expense by the payer. All right, what about house equity? So I'm gonna just blow through this. Chapter 7, I think there's just a couple things. Chapter 7 is what? Bankruptcy. It's a discharge of creditors. The house is the protected. The homestead's protected. Okay, so if you file bankruptcy and they discharge debt, can a mortgage just be discharged in bankruptcy? No. But it also is protected because when you file bankruptcy, you have to have your assets down to a certain level in order for the court to approve you, but the homestead's exempt. Okay, so that's important. A bankruptcy also creates a stay. Does anyone know what that is? It's like a lis pendens, but it's a stay. You can't do anything financially. Everything stops. Creditors can't collect. Mortgage companies can't report. Creditors can't even report on credit. They can't attempt to collect. They can't report on credit. And no financial proceedings can move forward. What do you think that does in the middle of a divorce? I've seen it. And sometimes it's a ploy to stop the proceedings. I'll just file bankruptcy. Sometimes it's legit, but sometimes it isn't. Spousal and child support is exempt from the collection, enforcement of collection. That is a key. Because not everyone divorces would file bankruptcy and they wouldn't have to pay their spousal and child support. So it is exempt from collection enforcement. If one party files bankruptcy and the joint is still reported, or the debt is still reported as joint, that debt will report later on credit as included in bankruptcy. Even if the person that the credit we're looking at isn't the one that filed bankruptcy. Do you think that can affect someone's credit? What do you think happens when we get divorced and then 6 months later, one of the spouses filed bankruptcy and there's still joint debt out there? And you have a year to refinance this mortgage. Yeah, it can cause a big, big mess. So bankruptcy happens, not very often right now, I'm not seeing it, but it does happen. One thing to note is if there is a pending bankruptcy or someone even threatens bankruptcy, the last thing you want to do is sell the house. Why? It's protected. The minute you sell it and the money goes from equity to a bank account, what happens? They should take it. It's available. It's available to pay debts. So the last thing you want to do, if someone's either threatens or if you know they're going to go into bankruptcy and have a divorce, you don't want to sell the house. Because that may change it all. All right, this is just chapter 13. There's a few differences. This is just a reconsolidation of all the debt, and then they negotiate with creditors to pay less to get it all paid off. It normally takes 3 to 5 years, still hurts credit, still hurts timelines, but it does not, it is still, the homestead's still exempt. This one can, though, potentially affect spousal support enforcement. So that's a little bit of a difference. Again, I'm not a bankruptcy attorney, so I'm not gonna tell you how, but it does also create a stay to other financial things going through. So if you have somebody getting divorced and one spouse files bankruptcy and we're in the middle of the divorce, you have 2 courts you're working with. The bankruptcy court that you have to get approval from and the divorce court. So you're working with 2 courts. In chapter 13, debts incurred to pay non-dischargeable are tax obligations, debts from a property settlement. They still have to pay. You can't discharge the asset settlement in a divorce. You can't say, well, I can't really afford that now. That those are all exempt. So you can file bankruptcy for your other debts, but just not like you can wipe out with the property settlement ones. And again, you wouldn't want to sell the house in the middle of all that. All right, we're in divorce matters. We are an equitable distribution state. We're not a community property state. So that means that things are not necessarily split evenly, but they are supposedly split equitably. Spousal debt liability and equitable distribution state. So this is more just the distinction between these two is in a common community property state. It's just like, 100, you just get 50. Here, it's more like how long you owned it, did you have a debt before the marriage, is it a marital debt, and how long you owned the house, did you buy it before you got married, and now they're in debt. So there's a lot of evaluation that goes on, and the judge makes these decisions if the parties can't come to an agreement together. So it's just not as black and white. And where some disagreements can come into play. And also it is supposed to be fair, but that doesn't necessarily mean it seems fair for everyone. All right, I'm not going to talk about that because we're not a community property state. We're skipping that slide, moving on. Chapter 7, build a team. So why do you have a divorce mortgage specialist when you work with divorce? I think I probably explained a lot of it. But we are specially trained. We are not mortgage originators. You'll have them getting divorced. We are trained to do we do divorce mortgage planning. And what that entails is a lot of proactive involvement. We'll guide legal teams. We're on the phone with attorneys, I've been on the phone with judges, I've sat in court. We do the divorce planning, we do pre-divorce needs assessment. For instance, let's say an attorney comes to me and says, I have a divorcing client, can you see if they qualify? I might advise the attorney that says this person would need this much spousal support in order to either qualify to maintain the home for the kids or buy a home that would accommodate the family, and that has to be involved in the negotiation of the divorce if we want that person to be able to afford a home. So I would actually maybe advise on that. I'm not going to influence because I want her to get more. I just might tell them that that's what that person would need to qualify. Okay, so we do a lot of home equity and accurate lien assessment by all those documents I talked to you about before. We'll pull credit, we'll get payoffs, we'll get title policies, all of which we can get during the process. Many times we're helping the paralegal save a lot of time because we're creating a case file. Because the documents that go in our file is very similar to the documents and information that goes on a marital balance sheet. The 1003 application pretty much can become a marital balance sheet. We do credit analysis for credit consultation and preservation, employment and income analysis. I have a divorce right now, we're going through that, she's gonna move to a commission position. And I'm like, well, don't do it now. You won't be able to qualify for about a year. And if you do it now, then you can't buy a house. Like you need to buy a house before the divorce is over, before you move to that position. So that's what we're helping you do right now. So all those things we do, and a little factoids, these are some little things you may not know. Child support needs to be received for 3 months in FHA and 6 months for conventional in order to be counted. One thing that you can do is use temporary orders, payments and temporary orders to contribute toward the timeline. A lot of people don't know that. I saved a deal by using that rule. Sometimes voluntary payments that are different from the agreement can be used for qualifying. Not if it's less, only if it's more. So you can't say I owe $1,000 when I voluntarily only paid $5. That doesn't work. But you could have $1,000 in the agreement and they have a history of paying $15. And if there's a history and we can document there's continuance, we can use it. Buying out the equity spouse is considered a rate and term refinance versus a cash out refinance. Why does that matter? Does anyone know what happens to an interest rate on a cash out refinance?
What's that?
Does anyone know what the loan to value limits are for a cash out refinance? Down. So if I'm doing as a rate and term, I can go to a much higher loan to value if I have to get the equity out, and that's going to be at a lower rate than if I file as a cash out. That is just a guideline that training in this I know, but a lot of lenders don't know. So someone might go in their divorce and say, well, I need to cash out my equity, and they go, well, let's do a cash out refi. Oh, I can't do a cash out refi. You're over 75% on the value. We have to go first, and second, and I'm like, no. You can go all the way up to 95% and get it done. It's not a cash out. So a really important rule we use a lot. A trust strategy can be used to qualify where maintenance spousal support may not be. So I had a case where we had the money go into a trust instead of spousal support because the spousal support was not going to continue long enough. So instead of doing spousal support, we dropped it in as an asset. We did asset equalization payment into a trust that created a fixed payment that we qualified with. And by the way, did that fixed payment have to wait 6 months? No, we could do it month 1. IRS provides a 90-day window for a cash purchase takeout of a mortgage to be considered acquisition of the indebtedness. That's more of a tax strategy. So you know the tax where if you have more of a mortgage than $750,000. I think that's it, right? If you have a mortgage of $1 million, you only get deduction for $750,000. The IRS recognizes a 90-day window to that. So if you went back, paid cash and came back and mortgaged it, they don't consider that an equity mortgage to change the tax deduction. They give you 90 days to fix it. And then maintenance and alimony, when we qualify people, we can deduct it from their debt to income ratio by deducting it from their income, not counting as a debt. That majorly shifts DTI, majorly. So if you have someone paying $5,000, let's look at really easy numbers. $20,000 in income, paying $5,000 in debt. If I subtract the 5,000 from the 20, I still have $15,000 in income I can use to qualify. Split that in half, let's say we go to 50 back ratio, I can qualify them for a $7,500 debt payment. If I have $20,000 and I qualify them for a $10,000, 50% of that, which is $10,000, and I subtract $5,000, I can now only qualify them for a $5,000 mortgage payment. Changes the numbers drastically. So that is another little rule that understanding the regulations and the rules in divorce helps people move forward with qualifying. And then this is my favorite one because it seems like nobody else is one. What's the definition of first-time home buyer?
Haven't owned a house in so many years.
Haven't owned a house in 3 years. What's the definition when somebody divorces and goes out to buy a house? So they just got divorced and the equity was just paid out to them. Are they a first-time home buyer? Yes.
Oh, really?
There is a distinction, and an house spouse from a divorce with only the other house they own was the marital property, which is now no longer they become a first-time home buyer. So if first-time home buyer loans are needed to qualify the borrower, we can qualify them as a first-time home buyer.
I have a question. So the rate and term versus the cash out refinance, is that something available for somebody who isn't married, or is that available for anybody who has two people on the mortgage and title?
It's available for any person on equity of a home that's being bought out.
Gotcha, okay.
And then we can eliminate the mortgage debt from qualifying as long as the court-ordered divorce decree says the other spouse is liable. Immediately. You don't need 12 months of payments, the spouse is paying for it. I can't tell you that people call me, say, I really want to buy a house, but I can't, I gotta wait for the 12 months history. 12 months history of what? Well, my spouse paid the mortgage payment. No. It's a court-ordered document, we can ignore it if we want. Wow. Has to be current. The mortgage can't be in default. But that's another rule a lot of people don't know.
That's awesome.
So again, you'll see we'll get calls a lot and we'll say, no, that actually we can get you into a house, we can help you qualify. And then your income received not taxed can be grossed up. So in other words, if someone's receiving child support and that income's not taxed, we can actually use a higher dollar amount than they're actually receiving and qualifying by 25%. It's called grossed up in our world. Did I touch them all?
Can I just touch on the 12 months real quick? If you, let's say you got a divorce, you guys kept the property together. House spouse made all payments for 12 months, and now you want to go buy the home, the out spouse. As long as they can document those 12 payments have been made on time by the house spouse, that would not be held against the out spouse for qualifying either. So that mortgage payment would also not be there if it wasn't included in the divorce decree as a debt associated to the
That's cool.
house spouse. Yes.
Yeah, and there's other provisions, like we just advised an attorney because of something we ran into, where an attorney wrote a marital settlement agreement and said, the other spouse is responsible for the payment. Great, clear, right? But the payment did not include tax insurance escrows. And because the attorney didn't write that the other spouse is responsible for the payment, taxes, and insurance, we actually had to hit our borrower for the taxes and insurance portion of that house in qualifying, and it negatively impacted qualifying.
Is it still considered a joint debt?
She's still liable, she's still liable on the house, yeah. And so we had to hit her for tax and insurance. Or remove her from title. And there was a reason she wasn't being removed from title because of a future provision in that decree. So again, we guide attorneys how to write this stuff up so that we're not attorneys. I can't advise on law, but I can say, use this verbiage or make sure you include this when you write it up. All right, so how do you become expert in divorce real estate? Educate yourself, number one. This is step one. Ask people who've gone through divorce for, this is kind of more becoming certified and looking at doing it as a business. The way I go about getting my attorneys and mediators is I actually talk to people that I know, that are either clients I've helped through divorce, and I ask them for their attorney and mediators, and I go introduce myself. It's a really easy phone call. We have a common client. I do actually call on attorneys and mediators. I now call on my attorneys and ask if they have other attorneys that could use my services. And now I have attorneys and mediators calling me. So once you get to that point, then you kind of are just your business, you're kind of known out in the circle and you're getting, business. You can become, you can work with divorce attorneys, mediators, child advocates. Financial advisors is another great connection, guys. When someone's getting divorced and they're gonna create a marital balance sheet, they go to the financial advisor, so the advisor would wanna refer a real estate agent. And estate attorneys, another big referral source that get involved in these situations. You can socialize on social media. That seems a weird one, but it's more being informative. Like, here's 3 top things to not miss if you happen to be getting divorced. So you're probably not gonna go out and say, everyone divorcing, give me a call. But you would maybe give them some information they may not know. Stay in touch with past clients. Why do I say that? 8 years is never. It's a virtual statistic, right? Odds are 50% of your clients over 8 years may be getting divorced. Partner with certificate mortgage lender like us and become a court appointed realtor. That's where you actually, the court is gonna call you up and say, you're gonna be the expert. I'm gonna kind of run through most of these really quickly. But you want to provide value before asking for business. That is really key. In fact, Dale and I had a meeting the other day with a mediator and just provided a lot of guidance. And while we were doing it, she was like, I have another client for you. That's what I gotta tell you. And so while we were doing this meeting, she was just thinking about all of the clients she had that really needed the advice we were actually talking about. You become a valuable resource and offer solutions to the law professionals, have a collaborative mindset. Understand that divorcing attorneys don't know real estate and divorce attorneys do not know mortgage. And then be committed. That's a big one. This is not a short time commitment, and it's not a 30-day relationship. Many times it takes 6 months before they're even calling me back for the mortgage. So I'm staying in touch with the team all along to make sure they have the information they need, but I gotta have some pretty strong commitment. I'm also staying committed to all those assumption applications that are gonna fail, and I'm gonna step in and help with the refi. So getting the word out to me is my best marketing strategy. I just tell people I am a divorce mortgage specialist. If you have a client getting divorced and you need somebody that's trained, come to me, because it's different. And most people understand what my knowledge is, and therefore that's how I market myself as being a divorce mortgage specialist. You can do drip campaigns. Again, for me, it's a hard topic to kind of go out and do it that way. But if you do, you're just adding value. Oh, yeah, make sure you educate yourself first. As you can see, there is some differences about doing this. There are some classes and specific certifications you can get. I have some QR codes at the end. This is one of the bigger ones that train specifically real estate divorce. We get trained in mortgage divorce, but there is specific training out there. And there are some of the websites, which I'm going to share this presentation with you so you'll get all that. And then you can purchase leads. I don't do anything like that. I partner with attorneys, mediators, and people in the family law arena. I don't search online for leads. And I keep my I refer leads back to attorneys as well. So I get a lot of people calling me up going, hey, this is gonna happen, what's gonna happen to the mortgage, and I have an opportunity to refer them back. Again, if you're gonna do that social media, please be educational. A lot of this is repeat, so I'm just gonna crank through it because
if you're kind of thinking, hey, maybe this is something you want to pursue, in creating
there's this
a partnership with us, that's probably your best approach, because now you're coming with a team approach. So not only is it, can I help this end, but I also have another expert on the one side. And so keep that in mind if you're considering your one-on-one.
And you need a team. If you're gonna represent this side of the business, you need a team. You probably want a CPA, on your team, you probably want a financial advisor that you can refer to. You definitely want a mortgage lender that is trained in this, and then you'll have your team. It takes a team. And then these are all the QR codes, which I'll send you. So you can. All right, so I'm gonna go through a few case studies. These are real divorce situations that I've personally been involved with. Most had good outcomes, some had less than best outcomes that could have been avoided or significantly improved had it been pulled in during the divorcing process. Some had unsolvable issues and they could have been avoided. Right? So this was the husband and wife decided to self-represent, they agree on the value, husband gives the wife equity. 2 years later, I think he went to sell the house and he had a structural issue in the house that had not been identified. The structural issue was expensive. I don't know if he knew about it or just didn't know about it or just thought it wasn't a big deal. Anyways, it was so expensive. He could not come up with the money to pay for it. We could not get enough equity out of the house because of what it did to the value of the house. He had to sell it at a significant discount to a fix and flip. The problem is they already agreed on the value of the house and the wife already had her money. Was the split of equity equitable? Because there was a condition in the house that was unidentified and they didn't get professionals in to guide them. So this one was, I had the wife come to me and the only source of income was the spousal support, and she couldn't qualify. So there was a provision in the MSA for a large asset event. So in other words, the wife was gonna get a significant amount of money, but it wasn't gonna happen for a few years. It happens a lot when we have businesses owned and there'll be some kind of deferred compensation. Well, I can't use that asset until she gets it. So I can't do anything with an asset depletion. She doesn't make enough spousal support. I was actually able to go back to the legal team and both spouses, doesn't happen often, and work the spousal support change so that the wife could qualify and it did not affect the financial picture of the husband. And all we did was make the spousal support slightly lower, but last longer, because it was the duration of it that was knocking her out. Everyone obviously was amicable and worked together, but we went back and said, hey, is there any possibility to go from 4,000 hours a month to 37 a month and extend that 6 more months? So that was kind of what we did. Could have been totally avoided had someone come to us up front and we would have told them exactly what to write so that they could qualify. Husband was divorced, house and divorce, wife was removed from title. After divorce in the same year, the husband sold the house. And the gain goes on the final joint tax return that was filed. Do you think the wife expected that debt? And it's joint. Yeah, because they say, I'm gonna keep the house no matter what, I'm gonna keep the house, my wife can't have the house, I'm gonna have the house, nobody's gonna keep the house, I'll just sell it to divorce and just make a big taxable event that caused a major problem. So again, another reason up front where we talk about, well, what if you keep the house, what's gonna happen with your taxes down the road? You're taking on 250 grand of capital gain that you don't get a waiver for. And oh, by the way, what if they happen to sell it in the joint year? So just discussions, doesn't mean you're gonna direct them, just means you're gonna discuss it with them. So in this case, the wife, we got divorced. The wife was awarded a very large asset equalization payment, but no spousal support. Okay, but therefore she has no income. But wanted to go out and buy a house and needed a mortgage, but we don't have any usable income. So we was just want to get the trust. Yeah, we were able to work with the legal team and have part of the asset distributed into a trust, but then had a fixed payment to the wife so that we could use, and the asset lasted for at least 3 years, so we could use the fixed payment from the trust to qualify. So it's just a difference in how she got the money, and then she could qualify. We basically created income out of that asset that was not enough to create income on its own. So another one. This is one I just went through. It was really sad. They didn't get an appraisal. They decided on what the house was worth, they went to mediation, I was even involved in the mediation, I asked, you should get an appraisal, you should get an appraisal, I was pulled on in this mediation Sunday night for a Tuesday morning mediation. Not exactly enough time to really have done a great job. I said, we should have an appraisal, they said, no, here's the value. They agreed to settle, thank God I pulled an O&E because there was a $70,000 lien on the property that the husband signed up for through a private lender. And he was the only one on the note, but that note, they filed a lien on the property, but the spouse, the wife was not knowledgeable about that. So there's a $70,000 lien that affected equity that became the main point of contention in mediation. She agreed to a marital settlement, a property settlement agreement. Then later, we found out that the house wasn't worth anywhere near what she was using as a 2-year-old CMA. And the condition of the house was so poor that it was worth even less. At the end of the day, there was absolutely no equity left. So she wanted to stay in the house to stabilize her kids. And because we didn't get the right tools in place and we weren't pulled in early enough, she made decisions in mediation that were poor. And at the end of the day, she just goes, I'll just forget it, I'll just hand him back the house. She ended up moving out with her kids and she ended up saying, you take the house, I'm out. So she was not on the mortgage. So she can do that. So yeah, that was really unfortunate. And again, not enough time for us to go in and guide it properly. Let's see. Oh, this is one, this guy I love, because he, to this day, if I call him and say hi, he goes, oh, I love you, you saved my life. So they were getting divorced, we were in the early stages, it was amicable, and when I ran the mortgage planning qualifying numbers, he was no longer gonna qualify after the divorce, because he was no longer gonna qualify with what he was gonna pay in spousal support and child support. So I said, what if we did a cash out refinance first, before you divorce? And talked to the wife and said, you'll stay on title, so you're protected, but we're gonna get you off the mortgage. We're gonna unravel the mortgage, so it's just in the husband's name. We're gonna get cash out, the cash is gonna be there. You're gonna stay on title, so you're protected, and then when the cash distributes, when you guys have a final agreement, you'll quit claim off title. And you'll have this mortgage, you'll be untethered with one file of a quit claim deed. And everyone agreed, and that's what we did. So we got him done before the divorce was, and that allowed him, if not, they would have had to sell the house, or he would not have qualified to take her off the lien, and she couldn't have bought her next house. She did go on and buy a house, and she knew the liquid funds were there, so she would go on the contract because we had the funds verified. So that was just kind of pre-planning our case study. This is just one I saved. This was a gal that came to me after going to her credit union and saying, you know, I can't qualify for the loan and that I'm under contract to close on my house and get divorced. And we just used a different rule, that temporary mortgage rule. The spouse had been paying, he'd been paying the spousal support. He had just been removing expenses out of it. So he wasn't paying a full amount wasn't going to her. And the other lender said, well, you can't use it. It's not consistent. I don't have a history. And I said, yes, you can, as long as I can prove the expenses he was taking out adds up to it. So we just documented a different way. We got some more paperwork and we got her closed. So again, just kind of knowing how to maneuver through that situation. We had temporary orders. He was paying. He just was taking expenses out. We documented expenses and we can use the full amount. Let's see, house used in the husband name, oh, this one's kind of funky. This one did actually happen where the wife originally wasn't on the house, but was awarded the house. And after the divorce, the husband unexpectedly passes away. And she still had not done the refi, which she was supposed to do in like 6 months. And they never thought about the insurance. There was also a major claim to the house. She wasn't on the insurance. So she wasn't insured. I did not think you would fix it. Yeah, so it was a weird thing, very unusual, right? When he passed away, he was the insured, and she was the one on the house, and she wasn't insured. Because we would have done it during the refi, updated the insurance, but she didn't get that step yet. So that one, yeah, so in other words, and don't forget insurance, it's a big deal. So the wife sold the house, will refinance the joint mortgage debt and move the husband. Husband plans to cash out and pay her half of the joint debt after the divorce is final. The husband files Chapter 7. And so number one, we're stuck. We can't do anything. And the mortgage is reported in bankruptcy. Even though you can't write off a mortgage, it still gets reported in bankruptcy. It affected her credit because a lot of the joint debt was going to be paid off when we refinanced it. And so they got joint debt, so everything's reported in bankruptcy on her credit too. Now, she doesn't have necessarily, if it's joint debt and things went default, then it's affecting her credit too, but it was a major mess. We did get her refinanced, but her terms were affected pretty negatively. We did get it done, but it was a mess. So there you have it, another thing that can happen. This is one I'm currently involved in, it's actually closing Friday. This is probably my award-winning one. I got a call from the wife referred by a client that I worked with in the past that we also helped him through his divorce. And she says, I need to get out of my house. This is the gal also wants to move to a commission job with the same company. She'll make twice the income if she moves to this new pay. And I said, well, wait a minute, if you want to buy a house, that's going to affect qualifying, so you may not want to do that yet. Also, if you make twice as much, you might want to watch when you file your divorce as to what you're earning. So you might want to talk to a legal person. But the house was for sale at 1.87 million and it wasn't selling. It's a very unique house out east. And the person on title is the father-in-law and the wife, not the husband. And in order to replace the home, they need a pretty special house because this house has outbuildings because they have toys. They have, you know, side-by-sides and ATVs and dirt bikes. And so the house they need is going to be pretty unique. She wants to move on and buy another house. Matter of fact, she did move on and wrote a contract that she had to terminate because the house didn't sell. And while they're in this limbo and there's no divorce agreement, I have to counter for the mortgage. I can't ignore it because there is no agreement yet. So I said, is your father-in-law and husband willing to talk to me? This is where I went from an advocate to a neutral. Because now I'm talking to the husband and the father-in-law, and I asked them if they wanted to stay in the house. I'm like, do you want to stay? And they said that they couldn't afford it, so we structured a cash out refinance that is giving the spouse part of her equity buyout. She's not getting it all, she's willing to defer some of her equity buyout. She will end up filing a lien on the property to protect the rest of her equity buyout. So she'll have a lien sitting on the property. And with this property, it's very unique. There's this 2.5 acre parcel that they want to separate off and they'll sell that. But they needed $12,000 to do that. And they didn't have that. They can't afford the new mortgage. So we built a subsidy account. We have 65 grand coming out for nothing else but make sure the mortgage stays paid. We're getting her off the mortgage. She's now under contract for her new house. And we're allowing them also to get the ADU that's on the property that's not permitted so they can get rental on the ADU to afford the payment. All that is going on in a cash out refinance. It took 4 months.
Oh, Jesus.
It was a lot.
A lot of moving parts.
A lot of stuff, yeah. Everyone had to kind of cooperate. The thing with that was, I think the most unique thing about that is when it first started, when that first phone call came in, super high tension. Nobody was talking. Her husband and father-in-law are just, you know, they're just, you know, nobody I ever want to see or talk to again. Or they happen to be the father of her kids. So I hate to tell you this, but you're going to see and talk to me again. And then when I said, well, wait a minute, maybe we could do this. Sounds outlandish, but are they willing to just talk to me? And after 2 months or 3 months of walking through this, because there, you know, it took a lot of kind of doing spreadsheets and showing them how it's going to work. They then gain trust in me that it is going to work, and they do ultimately want to stay in their house. They don't want to leave that house. They love that house. So in the end, they all started talking again. So now we close on the father-in-law and husband on Friday, and she closed on her new house at the end of the month. She's gonna get 100 grand out of the equity and she's gonna defer 162 on a lien. And when they portion off the lot and sell it, she'll get her money. So everyone's pretty protected.
Very creative.
Yeah, now I have to describe all that to the attorney who's gonna write up a marital settlement. That's my next phase. She's
I was
like,
gonna say, is there an attorney involved?
not yet.
Not yet.
So, she's got one online, but I just said, my advice to you right now is do not have, just get this done and then go into the divorce proceedings. There's a reason for that on the lending side. So we're talking about the timing of all that, but, it did, and by the way, the spouse is also gonna get all of his debt paid off with the cash out equity, the equity of the house. He's gonna be debt free, just have the mortgage, subsidy account, portion off the lot, get the ADU permitted so they can get rent. She's gonna get enough money to move on with her house and keep her house affordable, and she's secure for the deferment of the rest of the money. It ended up being a very big win-win.
Win-win.
But it took everyone talking. When I first started, nobody was talking. So that kind of win is part of the things we bring to the table when we're involved in these situations, thinking out of the box, creating a solution, having people think of something they didn't think of. Because the father-in-law was just like, well, I can't qualify, what are you talking about? You're an idiot. You don't know what you're talking about. And it's like, oh, I might know a little bit, but. So my line of thinking was, it doesn't cost you a dime to talk to me. Do you wanna talk? And then we are 4 months in and we're closing Friday.
Congrats on that.
That's all I got. Oh, and just in closing, remember property division and divorce is final. Take post, divorce credit is critical. Damage to credit cannot be fixed post-divorce, and make sure not to forget about the condition of the insurance. And it seems to lose importance, but it is very important. And the earlier we get involved in guidance, the better. The more means. That's it.
Thank you.
Stay out, right?
I know, it's been 3 hours, but like, I can't sit on for 3 hours and even think. Thanks for coming, I really appreciate it. We will, repeat this course if other people aren't interested, but next time Mitch or Dale will teach it.
Thank you.
So, do I have the script so I can sign them? You did? Oh, sweet, okay. And then we need, I wonder why these were here. We need that attendance sheet that's on your right. All right.
I gave you.
Okay, it's better. Fine.
Thank you.
For your records.
There we go. She's. Deleted all of my dates and deadlines templates, but I can't figure out what they are. And now I've been hanging up the timing to always off the top of my head.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm Margaret. Good to meet you. Oh, well. You were here yesterday. Monday, I just want to know. Because I saw you.
That's a good question.
Okay.
Oh, that's fun. Notes there.
I'm finally able to thank you.
Oh, yeah, that was a lot. Well, I learned a lot.
Yeah.
And I've been in business for over 10 years.
Oh, so you,
So that was very
so.
smart.
So we will be in touch, and talk about what.
Ready for a fun massage?
What did you say?
I said amazing things.
Yeah, so.
Yeah. We will. Take a good number here.
I think Jared didn't say the version. Yeah.
I just keep them.
Oh, just hold on.
Yeah.
Okay, also, I can say.
Because they have.
Right, yeah. That's all. Okay.
I will.
And I'll see you, great.
Yeah, it's send them
You want a copy?
Yeah. And are you on? It's real estate. So he's made that same transition.
You know, I. So that's what also. Yes.
Because you, those certs have your name on it.
You know.
Always.
Well, or.
I can always respect the church.
Yeah, so I, you know, I had my back to
You just got on the call.
Oh.
Had you-
Introduce them to similar story, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, awesome, well, we will get in touch.
So the name tag serves as just in the system of being in construction. Right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, for that, for us. No, figure out gutters, just something that. I just have to.
And this is all updated information that I basically created for this thing. It's not.
And then,
But it's just.
Yeah, welcome.
Yeah, thank you.
What's the message? Don't get divorced.
Been there, done that, and I'm gonna do it again, so I've been engaged for 4.5 years and we're finally going to Mexico in October to plan our wedding. And like, it's funny, cause we just like had an argument one time, I was like, I feel like you don't like me, it's like, you